from just outside the Empire City at the crossroads to the northeast. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Wherever you are and whenever you are, this is your premier podcast for all things unknown, not media, and I'm your host, JP. Welcome to Not Media. And for episode 10, I was fortunate enough to get a longtime friend of mine who, coincidentally, and this is why I'm having him on, but we've also stayed friends throughout the years since I started investigating this case and of the what's being now referred to generally through the community of researchers and people with any interest in this topic is the Dragonfly / CARET or California drone sightings. His name is Anthony Tekatch. And again, I said he's a longtime friend of mine, originally one of the moderators of the Open Minds Forum group that was investigating the CARET Dragonfly case. And he's also the owner of Unihedron, which is a website that specializes in sky meters for astronomers. Welcome to Not Media, Anthony. How are you doing today or this evening?
Great, John. Thank you for having me on. After all
Yeah.
these years, we get to meet live in person.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
this is
and,
So for those listeners, we've stayed in touch over the years since approximately I got involved in this investigation or had an interest this back in like early to mid 2008, and we've basically just communicated through email throughout this years on not only this topic, other topics of life and such. But it's hard to think that 15 years has gone by, but and that's how it goes. Time goes, and unless you stay on top of things, unless you stay active with certain topics and stuff just kind of tends to fade out. And I noticed that with this case when I was trying to pull it back up and trying to get in touch with some of the people that I was originally in touch with, like for example Tom Davis. He he was the original investigator who was a retired sheriff out from California. He declined to do the interview just because it's been so long, and I don't think he's doing the research anymore. But he was one of the people that had feet on the ground out there in California for this topic. Him and a partner of his, and so it's great to have Anthony on, and it's great to be able to talk about this topic. And just before we get into the whole California a drone case, it's interesting that you also do, and this almost seems like this would be by happenstance that you just happen to do a website where you sell sky meters for astronomers and such. Is this some like an off topic, or is that how you originally got involved with this? Was this a related or not?
well, I guess part of it way back in 2002, 2003, I had left one of my jobs, and I thought, well, what are the things that I really want to do in life? And one of them is, look, get back to my hobbies like astronomy. And another one was to see or to look into UFOs. I'd always been interested, like way back since the 70s. What's really going on? I'm going to dig right into this. And well, the astronomy thing led me into the business of the light meters that I build with a partner of mine. And so that business was kind of going up until like started in 2005, and then in 2007 when this case hit, I'm still interested in things and I saw it. So yeah, I guess it's somewhat related in my mind anyway, and I'm sure not
Yeah.
all astronomers believe that, but some astronomers, they are looking at the sky to see, what's up there. Am I going to capture something with my telescope or what?
Well, let me tell you something. As far as I know, because I've been staying, I fell off a little bit, as far as myself getting involved with a different career in law enforcement with the whole UFO research. But recently, I'd say the past year or two, I've gotten back into it, especially hearing all these revelations. And over the years, I've stayed in touch kind of with the public view and how it's being perceived just throughout academia and even on a government level. And obviously because of that whole New York Times article in the late 2000, I think it was December 2017. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. I think it was written or investigated by author and UFO researcher Leslie Kean. It was about the um, the program that was kept secret, and how they were the ATIP. It was the advanced aerial threat phenomenon. They had some sort of a secret program since like the mid to late 2000s, and then it came to light, and it became national news. So it kind of publicly turned the tides as far as people in the mid 2000s upwards into the 2010s were still laughing at this subject, especially when the whole Dragonfly CARET California drone story came out. It was still very much a taboo subject being spoken about on the internet, but being laughed at by the mainstream. And now this whole subject has kind of been catapulted into the mainstream, and there's a lot of people now that are taking this more serious. Like when I listen to one of the astronomers that's on Coast to Coast a lot of time, and I hear him on the Frank Morano show quite a bit. Dr. Sky, they call him Stephen Cates. You know, he'll even talk about it like with an open mind, and he's a astronomer that goes and speaks to many people, and he has a big following, and so it just goes to show people are now taking this a lot more serious, and obviously because they're having congressional hearings here in the United States about the reality of this, it's opening the doors for people to take it serious, and especially in like the um, collegiate level, which up to this point, it was normally just laughed at. So there's a lot more people with open minds to it now, even if they're not 100% on board with saying like, hey, with everything with Roswell and all the stuff that's been going on, and Bob Lazar, these are the stuff that's been circulating in the UFO community for decades now. So even if these people aren't on board with all that content, they're at least open to hear about the possibility that, hey, there's being objects being photographed by the military. And I think with people like David Grush and Commander Fravor, I think people coming forward now are listening to military people who have had sightings and have put their reputations on the line to come forward. And and even in David Grush's case, if you listen to the congressional hearings, during the congressional hearing, he stated that he understands that not only have people been threatened, but people have been killed for secrecy in this country relating to this topic. So they've clearly risked a lot to, put their reputations on the line to make it a little bit more, um, I don't know what the appropriate word is, digestible to the general public. So now um, it's kind of good to be revisiting a topic like this, because over the years, when I look back into this, like I said, it fades out. It was hard to find a lot of information about this. This is very, unless you were really involved in this in the mid to late 2000s. If you speak to somebody about this now, this case, it's kind of faded out. So if that was an intentional thing, and it sounds like from some of the research, like with the I know I had written down in my notes, one or two of the witnesses had stated that they were possibly, there was possibly some strangeness going on with some intimidation. Like one of the witnesses said his Flickr account was shut down, um, and according, I think it was on Earth Files website, I think another one of the witnesses stated that he was getting like phone calls in the middle of the night, and then somebody would hang up when somebody was calling him. There's a possibility if any of these witnesses turn out to be real, and as of right now, we don't know whether the whistleblower Isaac is a real person or whether any of these witnesses were real. If this is all just some sort of general hoax or some sort of a project, that is unconclusive as of right now. But if it wasn't, there was a possibility that there could have been some coercion, and even coercion, if you can see, you know, somebody wouldn't necessarily have to intimidate you and just come out and make a threat at you to coerce you. All of a sudden,
Right.
if you were on my program, and then tomorrow, all of a sudden, at 1:30 in the morning, you get a phone call, and then when you answer, you hear somebody breathing on the other line, and then it hangs up, and then
Yeah.
like it gets your mind rolling. And even if the person doesn't say a word, and you're like, wait a second, what is the one thing in my life that has changed? It was almost like as if
Right.
I don't know. Did you see the newer documentary that Jeremy Corbell did on Bob Lazar's whole story, whole history of his
Maybe
work?
not the recent one. I've seen a lot of Bob Lazar stuff
Okay.
already.
So on the newer documentary, and this is a spoiler for those who haven't watched it. I'm just using this as an example. Um, toward the middle to the end of the documentary, and this is purely from memory because I did watch the documentary, but it's been at least I'd say 6 months to a year, if not more, that I watched this documentary. So Bob Lazar speaks about how when he worked at Area 51, he was actually able to sneak a little bit or a little sample of this energy source that he claimed powered this flying saucer or UFO, or now you'd call them UAP, that he was attempting to help back engineer the propulsion system for. Um, he was able to sneak a little bit of it out, and he said that during the documentary. And he said, like, almost immediately after he even said it, and they weren't even live on camera, like it, they were he experienced some sort of a situation like the following day where his laboratory, and I think it's called United Nuclear,
Yep,
I think that's the company that he currently
that's
owns.
right.
The
Yep,
following day there was a raid of his laboratory, and it was the FBI or some federal, it was one of these alphabet soup agencies, I think it was the
right,
FBI. And they basically just said you are having an audit, and they searched his whole laboratory. So basically he said on camera during the documentary that, or they allude to, because I think they had to edit that part out, but he alluded to that he was able to get a little sample of this element 115, which is a solid element that has now been proven to exist, or at least be able to be lab created. I think it was, I don't know if it was Russia or somewhere in Europe. I remember there's a story within the past 15 to 20 years where they actually were able to fabricate a very small amount of this element 115, and then it dissipated very quickly. It's very unstable. But apparently
yeah,
Bob Lazar claims in his story that this element 115 is what the this race or this group of either, we don't know, interdimensional or alien beings were using to power the ship. And somehow it modified gravity, or it manipulated gravity so they can bend space and travel
right,
through space time, as opposed to the typical way that we're used to traveling is point A to point B, as opposed to if point A is here and point B is
yeah,
here, if you were to do that, you could technically close the distance. And we see that in a lot of science fiction warp drive. So he's stating at some level there's some reality to this, and that this element 15 helped facilitate that process. So the second he talked about him actually sneaking a little bit of this 115 back to his private laboratory because he wanted to play around with it, see what he can do, he said they were getting a lot of problems with the documentary. His uh, laboratory was raided the next day, and they claimed the pure reason why it was raided was we're just doing a general audit to make sure all of your um, items and all of your chemicals and everything that you're doing is in compliance with the law. And he was like, well,
right,
it's really coincidental that I just spoke about potentially violating some sort of a oath, a national security oath, by taking some sort of top secret item out of a top
right.
secret laboratory. And then the next morning, all of a sudden, I got the feds showing up at my door, raiding my lab. You know what I'm saying? So like
Oh
intimidation,
yeah,
they don't even have to say it. It's like almost
right,
like implicit, like he knows exactly why it happened. And then if they could say, oh, yeah, we just want to make sure all of your SOPs are in order, and that when you have new employees here, you're training them properly. Yeah, that's why we brought 10 agents to your house and we searched every inch of your laboratory head to toe. Because
yeah,
we just do this randomly, and you're like, all right, gotcha. Copy that. So anyhow,
sure, yeah,
getting into where we are at, you told me something very interesting, and you shared with me a documentary for some research that you've been getting into. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, so maybe you can kind of talk to the people and say, where are you at? Maybe first off, you can talk about how you got into this research with
for sure.
specifically the CARET drones, and then what path that has led you down over the years, and maybe some of your findings.
Right, right. Well, I could start sort of from the beginning when I got interested in it. Was back in 2007, and just taking a look at Coast to Coast AM. They had shows on and pictures and whatnot, and I was sort of slightly interested in most, pretty well everything there. But this Carrot drone thing caught my attention. It's like okay, this is a case that I could really sink my teeth into, get interested in, or whatever, or go as far as I could anyway. I'm not a big top research UFO researcher, a name or anything like that, but at least I could read about it because it had everything. It had photographs, it had eyewitness, it had documents from like government documents, secret government documents from years gone by. It had pictures showing something actually working. Like, we always say, okay, talk is cheap, but let's see something, give me an artifact here. Let's see a real object that can float in the air or whatever. It had that. It had the picture of these objects that, were actually floating and whatnot. So, okay,
Yeah, yeah.
all the promises here.
It was the
And
trifecta, yeah. Everybody always
yeah,
claims, "Hey, I'll believe it when I see it. I'll believe it when I see it." And then all of a sudden, this case came
exactly.
along. And it's like check, check, check. It starts to check off all the boxes of the one that might be
Yeah.
the uh,
And it
the
was
Pandora's
current.
box. You know?
You've got these eyewitnesses somehow, going through the internet now. As far when I found it later, nobody had actually talked in person. Like the all of the you could say there's a group of witnesses that you already mentioned, like Isaac and the other ones like Raj and Chad. Those all those people had submitted things through the internet, like emails, photographs, Flickr account. They had all and by letter, like pictures in a letter. Nobody had actually talked or conversed back, so there was no way to find out, was this all one person? Was this just like, are we talking to just one person, or is it multiple people? So that we couldn't find out, but everything else was, actively happening right in 2007, spring of 2007. Uh, there was things going on, like every week something new would come out and I'd see, oh wow, this is amazing. And then the next thing, this government paper came out, and this is amazing too, like leaked photographs from a whistleblower.
Yeah.
And
You
then
want me to
there
share
was
some of those? I could pull
yeah,
those up
certainly.
if you want me to pull those up. You know. So these will be
Okay,
some of the So these will
yeah,
be
certainly.
some of the
Put some of the
photographs
pictures up. I think I
that were.
sent you a few there. For example, the first picture is one of the photographs. There's actually a lot of photographs that came through, but this one here was done by someone claiming to be, his name was Raj,
Okay.
and uh, and he said that he was taking these pictures in the city Capitola, which
Yeah.
is near, I think, San Jose or something. Or,
Okay.
I can't remember the city. It's
Ju-
near anywhere. It's in California.
just for reference, I'm going to kind of scan. I did a map shot,
Oh, okay,
and
perfect. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Raj's. If you could see my mouse pointer, I believe Raj was the third sighting. So we had Chad, then we had Deborah,
Yeah,
then we
yeah.
had
He was
Raj was
okay.
number
Yeah, that's where he
3.
is. Right,
So it's
right in
near.
that
It's in this area, I guess, a little bit south, a little bit north
area.
of
Right.
Salinas, and
Yeah.
a little bit south of San Jose. Right on the water, though. It's right on the coast, right there, number 3.
Right.
So in this
Right.
area, this would
So,
be
that was a pretty amazing
Raj.
photograph there. You got a photograph. It shows the bottom of this fancy craft, like the UFO or whatever you want to call it, and it's got letters on it. So,
Yeah, yeah,
and
and this is
I'm
crystal clear.
yeah, that's right. It's perfectly clear, and
This is
it's
a pretty much
behind
high
the wires.
resolution.
So, if it's a real photograph, that's pretty amazing. It's floating
Yeah,
in the air.
daytime
There,
sighting. It's a
yeah,
daytime
that's
sighting,
right. There's
which is strange, you know?
yeah, yeah. You don't get that, and so it's got everything. Of course, when you go to some of the forums that were active on there, there was the Open Minds forum. There was Above Top Secret. A lot of the people had already come on and said, "No, this is all fake. I can tell by the pixels."
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
fine. You show me how it's fake, and that's what I was quite interested in. Like, it could be real, it could be fake,
yeah,
but give me a good explanation. And a lot of them just said, "Hey, you're an idiot." That was their
yeah.
explanation. You
That
you don't know what you're
that's
talking
not
about.
good enough. I can tell by the pixels isn't good enough because I
Yeah,
agree with you. I haven't really heard any very strong argument to this day. I still haven't
no,
really heard any very strong argument,
yeah,
minus. did you get a chance? And I tried to pull this up just to refresh my mind, but I remember the Discovery Channel, MUFON even did a special on this on the Discovery Channel. It was like an hour-long special, and I tried to find it on the I kind of just tried to search it, and I couldn't find it through, like, YouTube or any it wasn't really it couldn't seem that it was posted anywhere, but the long and short of it is that, the special basically was themed around almost more like instead of saying, "Hey, what is this? Can we get more?" Because I think if we could prove that one of the witnesses are real or the whistleblower is real, I don't really think we need to ask what is this because I think it's pretty much been all laid out as far as whoever these supposed witnesses and whistleblowers
Yeah.
are. More
Right.
like, is it real or not real? Because the what it is has been spelled out pretty much note for note. I mean, by the whistleblower. So, but the Discovery Channel documentary, it seemed like it was there was a pitch to it. You know how, like, when you watch a news channel, they say, like, some
Yep.
news is liberal, some news is conservative. The
Right.
pitch on this show was that this is fake, and
Hmm.
we're just going to kind of run you through why it's fake. And
Sure.
then even the arguments when they brought in, like, some CGI specialist, he's like, well,
Yeah.
this could have been. And I'm like, yeah, you're saying
Yeah.
it could have been, but you didn't really show how it was, or we still haven't found out anybody who did make this. And this looks like pretty
Yeah.
damn good graphic art if it was done at all. So yeah, so we actually don't know. And I think it's witness
Right.
intimidation and it's investigator intimidation when you put your name out there as somebody who had an open mind and said, "Hey, let's just find out. I'm not saying it's real. I'm not saying it's not real, but all I know is that it hasn't been proved either way, and it's very compelling." And then people are on these forums calling you names and this very, like, low ball type of intimidation
Oh yeah.
against you,
Yeah.
dissuading you from trying to push yourself further into this. So I think that's a form of intimidation also. And
Yeah. Well, that
but
never works on me. So
okay,
if
good,
somebody,
good,
yeah, so I'm not going to let that ever come. If that means just that they don't have the information,
got it.
they don't have anything.
Yeah,
So yeah, it looked pretty to me. It looked pretty interesting. It looked like, hey, this could be real, and uh, and at the time there wasn't a lot of pictures that looked like that on the internet. I mean, this
yeah,
was unique. It had these antennas. The witness account of that said, "Oh, it's making a static sound like a buzzing noise." Some of the witnesses said that. So there was some noise that went along with it.
yeah. Yep. Actually,
Uh,
there was more. Yeah, I read that when I summed it up. That was like the one, minus the movements of it, how it kind of moved almost like a water bug on top of water, and
right.
not like how we would normally associate some sort of a craft that was using a propulsion system that uses air displacement to move. We're familiar with
Exactly.
helicopters, how they move. We're familiar, and in all of these type of situations, even if it was a type of, let's say, a helicopter, in order for something like a device, I mean, I think we could. I don't know exactly how big that this first picture is. If we would have an estimate of, I thought just by the perspective of the telephone pole. I mean, the circle on that has to be at least what I'd
I think it's
estimate it
about
has to be.
16 feet or something like that. The
How much?
circle's about 16 feet.
Yeah. Okay.
16
So
feet
that seems about
diameter,
appropriate.
probably 40 feet altogether.
Okay.
There was a lot of people doing calculations on, okay, it looks like it's so far away. And because that's
Yeah.
all we had to work with.
Yeah. 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 Not
You
that
know,
much.
no, there was, like I say, the witnesses or these people that submitted it, there was no way to really talk with them. I guess there was kind of a way to talk with Raj uh, on the open mind forums. Somebody had somehow put something out and contacted him, and he did respond, or that person did respond and answered it, and then they just said, "Okay, I don't like the way this is going," and then they never responded after that.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
how they got his email, I think it might have been through his Flickr account. But
Okay.
some some of the things here, a lot of people looked in Capitola. In fact, that's where we had sent, we had hired these detectives. One of the fellows in our drone detective team, he's from France, and he had some money. He's a radio host or broadcaster or whatever in France, and he had a show on all about the paranormal, and he also talked about UFOs in the USA as well. That's Didier Deplage,
Okay.
and he funded these detectives, Tom Davis and his and his partner to go out to Capitola and look, and they looked all over. They looked basically for this pole that you're looking at here now. They were looking all over, taking pictures, and most
Yeah.
in a particular city, poles always pretty well look the same in that city. And you go to the next city, then they have different things. So all those struts on the top there, they were looking for. They looked all over, I would say, through the city, and didn't come up with anything. Then it was later on, one of our people from another forum that we made up, the droneteam.com forum that we had made up. This is like all with free software and whatnot.
Yeah.
But one of the other members, he, I think it was HPO was his online name. He looked through and he was going through all up and down the streets on, you can do that on Google Street View. You can go up and down the streets. He
Yeah.
had these algorithms that he wrote to look up and down. He couldn't find it there. So then he started looking in different streets, and he found like in different cities in that. And he found that it was in a city called Campbell, which
Oh.
is, so it wasn't Capitola, even though this Raj witness had continuously said, "Oh, it's in Capitola, Capitola." So as soon as everyone realized, okay, that particular pole is in Campbell, which is near closer to San Francisco.
So
It's
it's
just
not
like south.
so
What's that?
so geographically speaking, it's not like that close to Capitola, like a 5 minute
Oh
drive or
no,
anything like he
no,
could have just been
yeah, it's like
mistaken completely off.
more than half an hour drive. It's its own
Okay.
complete city, and
Huh.
it's a totally different place.
So
So
that already makes you start scratching your head if someone's coming forward and they're giving no information about themselves. If the information
yeah,
they're providing starts to fall by the wayside as far as the facts they're providing, it
right,
start to put everything else into question. And I can
right.
understand that, because if
Oh
it's
yeah,
not
there could
if
be.
it
Go
yeah,
ahead.
if a picture of your house isn't in the backdrop, if a picture of your girlfriend's not in the backdrop, like
Yeah,
why would you decide to lie about something like that? Because you cannot see any other discerning facts in this picture other than a telephone pole. And there's even no
right,
number. I work in law enforcement. It's like every time a pole goes down, if there's a car accident and we have to contact the local energy company, the first thing that we do with our dispatchers is we have to get the number on the pole. There's usually two placards on every telephone
right,
pole. I think one's a local number and then one is the number assigned. It's almost like a location number for the energy company. If there is an accident or if there is some sort of service they need to do, they can dispatch their workers to a pole and they have them all
right.
numbered. So that would so without any of that, the question is why would you lie about that?
Exactly. Yeah. Now there could be reasons, obviously, that maybe he didn't want to attract attention to, he said he was visiting his family or something. Maybe he didn't want
Okay.
to attract attention to those people, so he threw it off. And there's always, there's ways of going around it,
Yes,
which could be explainable. But that
that's
was that
correct.
happened about a year after this case started.
Okay.
We didn't really get mobilized with the detective or anything for quite a long time after. So that was, that was a big deal. Um, and then, so when we found out that this is where it is, we had the detectives go around in the neighborhood and set up little flyers and say, "Okay, if you had seen this, please come forward and answer my questions." And the detectives actually thought that they had a good idea of who might have done this. Like they talked to people, and there was an apartment complex, kind of like townhomes or something, all stuck together. And they went around there and they asked certain people, so they kind of had an idea. It could be these two fellows that live in this particular apartment or whatever. And uh, the detectives went there and talked to them, and it didn't really pan out that no, it might not have been that, or one of the guys didn't want to talk, and the other one that I think did answer, he just seemed like no. It didn't seem like those guys could have done this because
Yeah, yeah.
they
It would
would have been, they would have shown something. They're detectives. They were both cops before that. So just
y-
like you, they have like a second instinct of somebody's, this guy's for real or this guy's not for real. So,
yes, you have like a sixth sense, and turns out maybe it was
right,
just like a false lead of some kind or a potential lead, and it's just I guess
right.
in any investigation, if you're doing it properly, there's a strong probability you're going to come over many of these, especially if you don't know something. You're gonna have to come over maybe some dead ends. That like
That's right. Yeah,
you have to at least exercise caution and investigate them, or then you
right,
can cross them off the list.
right. And there were some other interesting things. These particular photos came to us, and maybe not everyone realizes it, but in digital photography, there's a little sort of an attachment to the file. It's called the EXIF, and it's got a bunch of data on there, like what kind of camera took this picture and when did it take the picture. It doesn't say where it got taken because
Y-
unless your camera's got a GPS on it or something. But there was a timestamp on these, and the timestamps were very close together, like minutes apart type of thing.
Yeah.
So once we found out where this pole was, and then there's a few other pictures in there too, and they were at different areas, different poles, you might say. Uh, we thought, okay, how long would it take for somebody to just walk and take this? We find out it's impossible. You could not walk between these poles. You'd have to be on a motorcycle and then go. And of course, the fellow that said he took the photos, in his writing, he said, "Oh, I just walked around." He didn't say anything about driving around on a motorbike or anything. So
Mm.
one of our guys in the detective team here, he lives in California, and he actually drove to that place. He got out and he tried his hardest to run between these different shots as if it was actually, taking the pictures and then running to the next shot, just like it was
Yeah.
said in the witness. And there was no way he couldn't keep up with it. Like he was
Okay.
really out of breath. There's no way he could take a camera and focus and do this stuff. It was too
And
hard.
and just to be clear, they found this pole that's in this original picture note for note.
Yes.
They found this
Yeah,
pole. This was the
exactly. That pole.
and then that
Yeah,
and then they found some of the other locations based upon the
that's
pictures
right.
of like where the two poles are, the different poles. Okay.
Right,
And so
right,
so now we have a second point of the story that's not jiving, which is now
right.
concerning. Starts to get concerning, like the more points that don't jive.
That's right. Yeah. So it appears, I mean, one of the theories there, if go on the fake side, one of the theories is that, okay, these pictures were composited on a computer and then just saved at, we're a minute apart or something like that. Okay. On
Okay.
the real side, it's like, well, maybe somebody was in a motorbike and they didn't want to give that away in their testimony, so they did that. Another
Yeah,
There's a lot of different possibilities for true or false, but
I
you have to
understand.
make up your own mind
Yeah.
on these things.
Those are both unknowns on both sides. There's an argument from one side, there's an argument, and if we don't know, there
Right,
could easily be one claim and then a counterclaim, and really
right,
either one doesn't hold more water because we don't know. And like you said, that could have been a possibility because if you are from the area, you do drive a motorbike. These are now two distinguishing features that are going to identify you as being, hey, I live in this area and I drive a motorcycle. You know what I'm saying? So this could be something
right.
that you don't want people to know because you're saying, hey, I want to come forward with this, but I want to remain
Yeah,
as anonymous as possible. So I'll change the name of the city.
exactly.
I'll change
Right,
some fact about me, and I don't want anybody knowing anything about me. So I
right.
understand.
Yeah, it can
For the
be like a way just to hide your identity. So
okay,
um, there's well, we can move on to maybe the next picture, and I can just kind of explain what's going on there. Now, at some point, there was this government document released. The first pictures that showed up were I didn't show it in there. There's just some of the pictures, but there was some pictures from Lake Tahoe.
okay,
Uh, okay, and they were kind of grainy. They had the same kind of shape, this weird shape with a fin sticking out and the antenna on the top, and they
yes,
were
those
taken.
those are from this the cell phone picture. Was it the Deborah McKinley photos? Because I said I'll just do a whole overview after this interview, and I'll
Oh
put it
yeah,
before this. So
right, right.
I'm going to show all that. Yeah, the cell phone photos taken that were
That's
dark and
right.
grainy looking. Yeah, so those I think
Yeah,
were the
so
Deborah
those were like the
McKinley photos.
right. They were the very, very first ones that came out, and that kind of sparked the interest of I think Coast to Coast. Somehow it got on there, and so
Yeah.
then this whistleblower comes along. His name is Isaac, but it's just like a whatever fake name. And think he kind of admitted that in his testimony. And he said, "Well, I got to come out with these documents because it's really important that this is what I saw and this is what I was working on back in, I think it was 1984." He explained, and it was this huge document. Not only was it his testimony, a page and a half or something that he had emailed in, but it was these leaked documents and had picture like what we're seeing here. These drawings, these were said to have been pictures that were taken off of this craft, and they tried to lay it on a piece of paper, and it somehow had this interesting property that just the way it was like a code or whatever, the way the picture was laid out, it did certain things, like it made it hover or something, and
Yeah,
visible, and things like that. So
I think.
it was apparently important in this
Yeah.
document. It was called CARET.
I think he was the one saying even the way that this page looks right here, the fact that there's so many circles because this is effectively how this presents itself on a two-dimensional platform,
Right.
but
That's right.
really in reality for this to be functional, whatever this script was, he said if it was imprinted on a certain type of material in a certain form at a certain angle three-dimensionally, that if a certain energy was reflected off of it, it would behave differently. And I guess he was saying that's why all the like the squiggly lines, because this is a way to kind of represent something that's in reality three-dimensional on a two-dimensional
Right.
platform. That's why it looks strange
Yeah,
like
they
that,
had
you
to
know?
transpose it from they said that they actually had the three-dimensional objects and they had to transpose the image from there onto this piece of paper in two dimensions.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was very interesting. I thought, "Oh, okay, that's and it was written up like somebody knew how to write this document,
Yeah.
whether it was the government or whatever. Somebody knew how to write documents. He talked about these old Xerox computers, and so somebody knew about the older computers back in the 80s, like what was available at the time. He
Yeah.
talked about having that kind of computer. So this was probably a person that was older to some degree, and he even explained himself as being of a certain age that at the time he was working. So, when we come up to 2007, this guy's already like in his 70s or whatever.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
so he, if that was the person that knew about it, yes, they must have known. And he
And
said approximately where he worked,
yeah.
uh, near some Google labs now currently. So we had the investigators go around in that area and look to see if they could find any buildings that had this underground thing. And so they actually went and talked to firemen, because firemen have to know if there's an underground, uh, whatever,
For
basements or
fire
whatever. So if
code.
there's a fire,
Yeah.
yeah, so they have to know all that. And then and there was discussions, nothing, and there was nothing conclusive. We couldn't find a particular building that had this underground whatever facility,
N-
but that doesn't
Now,
mean
just
that it doesn't exist.
just to be clear, this is the one that we're talking about, the what Isaac was referring to as the PACL laboratory, Palo Alto CARET laboratory, and that's
Right,
obviously in Palo Alto, California,
that's
or
correct.
he claims it was in Palo Alto, California. We're not,
Right,
without the
that's right.
conclusive. Now, just to kind of jump in here, just to interject for a
Yep.
second, I remember I couldn't find it for this podcast episode, but I remember over the years, because I've had such an interest in this, to the point where I even got some of this inscription. I remember back in around 2010, I got some of this writing, actually a tattoo, like a tribal style tattoo of some of these characters. So I was
Yeah.
really fascinated about this case. Wasn't or did you hear anything about a security guard coming forward in the latter years that stated that he worked in that area around that complex, and there was like rumors of potentially something going on in one of these buildings, like the government doing some stuff with potentially like alien technology or something? Or did you not read
No,
about
I
that
think,
person?
yeah, that sounds familiar. Yeah, we the detectives, Tom and Frank, they went around and talked to a lot of people, and they kind of, from what I remember, there was somebody that they talked to who seemed to confirm that there was underground facility and that there was something secret. Now we don't know for sure. I mean, the guy was kind of afraid to come forward, so I think they just ended up calling him Mr. X.
Okay, okay.
And
And you can
whatever.
understand, and you can understand,
Yeah.
like I said, even now when we have David Grush coming forward and Commander Fravor, people that uh, when Commander Fravor came forward and testified, for the congressional hearing about UFOs here in the United States within the past year, um, he basically stated, not in no uncertain terms, like this is the sort of thing, even in like 2003, 2004, that would ruin people's careers. Like
Oh
if a
yeah, for
pilot
sure.
came forward and said that they saw something, they'd be banned from flying anymore. Like some of these guys had to go through divorces. Like it would ruin people. He started crying when he was talking about it. Like this was the sort of pressure in reality for this whole like UFO sighting. So you could see, especially if obviously there's some truth to that. That if somebody was working in the 1980s, I mean, when this was completely unknown,
Right.
and that if they came forward and said, "Hey, you have some knowledge about this, you start talking about this, this is going to be a problem for you," like everything's okay for you now, but you start quote unquote poking the bear, you're going to wind up,
Oh yeah.
realizing that you shouldn't. So we could we could see that if there was some truth to this, why somebody might want to remain as Mr. X or whoever.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, there's no doubt about that. Yeah. Yeah, and that's this story is filled with uh, people coming forward and then not, getting afraid and then backing off.
Yeah,
It's all the whole thing is like that pretty well. I mean, even so, there was these group of witnesses that had these photographs that all came forward and were presented on Coast to Coast, and the Coast to Coast handed it over to Linda Moulton Howe to talk with Isaac. I've spoken to her and emailed her numerous times about the case, and at one point she thought she spoke with him, but then discussing later, no, it was just an email. So it was like an email conversation. So I'm pretty
okay,
sure that it was only an email. I don't think she
okay,
had his phone number. She doesn't know what he sounded like. Was he an old man or some young guy, or was
yeah,
I don't think there's anything like that. So there was no uh, back and forth discussion. Now, whether this person was afraid and they didn't want to get tracked, on the telephone, that could
yeah.
be. That's all possible.
And what was did you get a vibe with all the emails that you had exchanged with Linda Moulton Howe? Did you get a feel for where she was at? I mean, without putting words in her mouth, just kind of get a vibe. Like,
I
what
think so. Yeah.
did she feel
I
this was
think,
a genuine sighting with genuine people coming forward, or did this kind of
yeah.
have the air of like some sort of a hoax or somebody playing
Oh
games with
no,
her?
I don't think she thought that at all.
Okay,
Now, unless she was putting on a front for me and the people in our team, I think that she actually believed at the time. I think the last time I spoke with her was about probably 2000 and I don't know 10 or something like that.
okay,
But as far as I know, she believed everything. She was given a lot of information. She did. Uh, she didn't really interact with people. Somebody had mailed her photographs, and this was the Ty Brannigan photos.
okay.
I I do have that. If you go to the number fourth, you'll see that.
Yep.
Uh,
Oh, so we actually had a last name. I didn't realize that we actually had a last name. Did anybody attempt to
yeah, yeah.
that?
It came out later.
Okay,
It
because
was just Ty at first,
that
and
sounds like
then
a very specific. I've never heard of the last name Brannigan, so that sounds like almost like a very unique name. That if somebody searched that name, they
they're
might be
all
able to
very
find.
unique names. That's right. Yeah, there's
Yeah,
Ty Brannigan, Rajinder Satyanarinda. I
I
think.
saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like these are names that if you look it up on the internet, there's not too many people that have that. Well, the Ty Brannigan thing, that's the Brannigan is
Okay.
from there's a name in some kind of a cartoon back in the I don't know the 80s or whatever that
Okay.
has the last name Brannigan.
I
But
did. I did find somebody with the same name as Raj, and
oh
through my
yes,
own homework, I reached out to him through Facebook. Even before this, within the past 2 weeks, I sent him a Facebook message, and it was just the person that I did find. I was just kind of trying to do my own little investigation, but the
right.
person currently didn't live in the United States. But I noticed that in some of the pictures, somebody was liking his photos, and that person lived within a 25-minute car ride from Capitola, California. So I said, wait a
Oh,
second. So why would this person have somebody and they live all the way in India? Why would they have some? So, I like,
right.
there's really no conclusion on that. And the person did state they were engaged back in the mid to late 2000s and they got married to this. So like, I was kind of trying to piece
Oh,
it together. I said, well, this kind of adds up to the person that may have been in the area visiting his mother and father-in-law. He might have
right.
not been from the United States. He might have been engaged to a girl whose
Yeah,
parents live in the. So I'm like, I was just trying to do the math. So I reached out and I got no response, but I did my best with the
yeah.
information that was available because it's not easy.
Well, sure. Yeah, maybe he got afraid, or who
Yeah.
knows what. It would be great to have any kind of, current feedback of people that aren't afraid to. to state,
Definitely.
yeah, this is what I saw or whatever.
Because if we could find if we can find at least one of these witnesses who's willing to come forward and talk and and be genuine and be open about, give their full name, even if they wanted to remain anonymous to the public, but at least to investigators we could at least verify who they are, that
Right,
this is indeed a legitimate sighting. Because I mean, really all we would need is one person to come forward that we could verify. We say, hey, this person legitimately seems like they're telling the truth, and they're able to back it up with a lot of the information they're providing. Then it would start to put this whole story back into, like, possibly being real, as opposed to, as of right now, this almost seems like a cold case because
right,
there's not much more that has come forward, and all the witnesses have kind of gone back into the world of the unknown, soon
right,
after they originally came out.
right. Yeah, well, that would be great. Well, let's go back to this drawing that you have up here. Not that
Oh,
one,
this
but
one right here. Okay.
yeah, this was taken by this Thai.
Okay.
And, I'm pretty sure that's the right name. Anyway, if you look up close at this thing was floating over this area called Big Basin, and it's kind of
Yes,
on the way to Campbell, in between Capitol and Campbell. You could take an offshoot or whatever. So it's all in that area.
in the
But
area. Yeah.
yeah, and if you went to Campbell, you wouldn't have to drive too far to get to this Big Basin area.
Okay.
I mean, you would still probably, I don't know, 20 minutes or something like that, and
but
you'd be there.
but it's promising. I mean, if you were testing some sort of an aerial drone or doing some
Yeah,
sort of experiment, it's all kind of within a
yeah,
general area. We're not talking different states where there's a
no,
900-mile, 1,200-mile, like within a car ride, which
yeah,
is
that's right, for sure.
plausible. Which is plausible if there was something flying in the area.
Right. And you could see what I did was take these close-up images of these little panels or whatever, and show them in the red boxes there. So that particular craft doesn't look anything like the other ones, but I mean it's still got round spots, it's got antennas, and
Yeah.
stuff maybe is reused or whatever. But
The
those
material
panels,
looks the same, like the color, the material. It looks
right?
like, it almost looks like I was stating this. I was trying to describe this because people were saying, well, isn't it convenient on the skeptical side? Isn't it convenient that we have these one pictures and then every time we have another picture, they start to evolve and evolve and evolve? It's
Yeah.
almost like somebody
Well,
adding on to a story that they're telling. And I'm like, well, maybe it's just two totally different craft. But if you look at the structure of the craft, if you look at the color of the material, the type of material, the writing on the craft, like, it seems to be almost,
right.
if this were real, whoever the general manufacturer was of one of the craft, it easily could be argued that within the same area, a similar type of material, similar type of shape, that the top of the craft looks the same where the antenna are. So it's like,
Yeah.
it on the pro side, it could be argued that it's just a different craft, but of a
Right.
general construction.
Right. That's right. And if you look at those panels, they have kind of like drawings on them or whatever. Those drawings are very similar to the drawing that this Isaac guy showed in his paper.
Yeah.
So okay, there's definitely a link now between these images and this government released, this whistleblower released information. So you can see there's something going on now. Linda Moulton Howe was sent these photographs by this Thai,
Yeah.
so that's how he signed his name anyway. Uh, I'm forgetting if it was Ty or Chad, but anyway,
Oh no, so there was, I believe it was the last two sightings. They were taken both in big. This is the Big Basin. I think it was Stephen. There was a Stephen
yeah,
who
okay,
was
all
taking.
right,
It almost seemed like he was in the area. I don't know if it was for a school project or if he's just a
oh
photographer.
yeah,
Like,
that's right,
he was
yeah,
trying to take,
right, you're
just,
right,
and this is just off the top of my head. He was trying to take some sort of like a deep field picture where something like up close would have some sort of a long backdrop, and he was doing
yeah,
some sort of photography, and that was Stephen. And then that was the same exact day that this person Ty, and they were people that were non-related and didn't know each other, but they took this picture of the same craft in the same area on the same day in Big Basin.
right, right, okay,
So you
yeah,
had two
that's
witnesses.
uh-huh.
Yeah, you had
So
two witnesses of this, or supposedly.
right, yeah, supposedly two separate witnesses. So what was I going to say? Anyway, there's a number of pictures. Okay, Linda Moulton Howe was sent 12 of these photos, and the
Yeah,
photos showed this object spinning around, like, blah, 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 whatever. That
yeah,
somebody had taken a few of them and saw it spinning around.
Okay.
So that must mean it's moving or whatever in the
Or
sky.
spinning, like, rotating,
Well,
like left to right?
rotating, yeah, that's right, rotating around the vertical axis.
Got it.
So it'd go in different positions. And there was so much, like, this is one of the high resolution pictures. What she had done is taken these photographs, like a 4 by 6 photo that was sent to her in an envelope, and she got 12 of them. She scanned most of them to go on websites, and back in those days, cost more money to put a really high resolution image on a website. So they just put these low resolution images up there. So
Yeah.
she had scanned all of them in this low resolution and then made it available on her website. But a few of them she did a close up, and in one of them, I think, or two, she did these high resolution scans. So we were able to pull up some of these drawings on the high resolution ones and say, okay, yeah, this circle on this panel is white, and one of them is black, and one of them is like a gold color, and so we could see the pictures. And everyone investigating was really excited. They said, well, we want to see the rest of the images and just scan them. And what she would have to do is just put them into her photo scanner and make
Yeah.
them high resolution so she could see them, so we could see them.
Yeah.
Uh, but she had this thing in her mind where, okay, if I release more images, then if the real photographer comes along, how will I prove that it's the real photographer? Because they'll have their images, and I, I won't be
Yes.
able to prove it. And this was going on. This is like you saying to somebody, "I've got an alien in my basement." Like, everyone's going to want to go to your basement. They're going to be breaking in your house to go and see the
Yeah,
alien.
yeah, yeah.
It,
Yeah, exactly. Like, you have
yeah,
now you hold the,
yeah.
you know, what was that? The cup of the covenant, what was that famous,
Oh, the
goblet,
Ark of the Covenant. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, that Jesus Christ had on his last, supper, like, you
right.
you have that in your
Oh,
basement,
yeah.
and now that people
Yeah.
know. So I understand, because I get it in as far as the
Yeah.
investigative, purposes go, and I see, like,
Right.
when there's open investigations in the world of policing, like, I'll get emails sometimes, and they'll say at the bottom of the email in big red letters, "This is for law enforcement sensitive information only. Do not discuss this." And the reason why is because what Linda's stating is that you hold some information back because you want to keep that, um, you want to keep that, untainted and, unobjective. Like, this is what we have. This is what we have. Nobody else knows about this. So when we get more, we can bounce that off of what we have here, and the other people outside of this circle don't know what we have. So
Right.
it keeps everything, it keeps everybody honest. But if you show your hand, almost like in a game of poker, now everybody at the table knows what you got in your hand. So
Yeah,
now when
exactly.
people come forward with information, they can start bouncing that information off of what they know
Right.
you have, and it taints your investigation. So at some level, it's like you can kind of see both sides, right? Because,
Yeah.
but now here we are, how many years later, and I guess maybe she's hopeful that the person can still come forward, but, like, it's been, what, 15 years, and we haven't had any more. And obviously,
Yeah.
per isaac's per isaac's statement, he said he wasn't planning on coming forward. This wasn't something that
Yeah.
he said, I'm going to release this information. It's
Yeah.
going to be on, like, some sort of, like, a proxy server. You're not going to be able to trace this back to me, and
Right.
I'm out. Like, I'm going into,
Yeah.
my retirement, and I'm going to enjoy the rest of my life. I don't
Yeah.
need my life to be ruined by my identity coming forward and having them pull my pension. And
Yeah.
then the next thing you know, I'm doing the last 10 years of my life, away from my family in some sort of a military prison. Like, I don't
Right.
want any part of that. So I'm putting this
Right.
out there, and I'm not going to destroy my life over this. So,
Yeah.
everybody could have at it. So, so per the whistleblower, he stated he was not going to bring any more information forward. This was it. This was a
Right.
wrap. So, but, the fact that Linda may still have these photos, I don't know if that would be
Who
helpful
knows
at this
what?
point. Yeah.
Yeah. She drove a lot of people crazy. There was a lot of people on the forum saying, "No, she's not doing her job. She should share this with us." And there was a
Yeah.
lot of animosity between other people. Like, I didn't really care. I understood what's going
Yeah.
on. It would have been
Yeah.
nice if she had done that, but what's it going to prove? It's not going to really prove anything. Okay, some pictures match up or whatever. It doesn't.
Oh yeah, ultimately, think about it now, 15 years later. If she did release those photos, and it turned out some of those high resolution photos did match this, so then all you would have is a group of people coming forward and say, "Hey, whoever hoaxed the government documents, hoaxed the photos, and they were in
Yeah,
cahoots, or maybe it was the same person."
right,
Like,
right.
what, like ultimately, like, would that have proved the case to be true without the main problem with this right now? And I was thinking about this after kind of just doing my just uh latter research, which is now for this podcast episode, was that we need, and it was like something like witness repudiation. It was something that MUFON stated, like you need to have something come forward that cannot be reputed. Like nobody could just say, hey, this person doesn't exist. You could say, no, no, we know this person exists.
Right.
We've identified them, we've spoke to them on video, we've seen a driver's license, we've checked that driver, like we've
Yeah.
done all of our checks to say this is a real person.
Right.
And that is the main problem with this case right now, is we don't have a real person or
Well,
a
that's right.
person
Yeah.
willing to come forward. So yeah, so even
Exactly.
if
And what you said before about the documentary with the MUFON investigators and whatnot, at around after that time, or around the time I had actually signed up to MUFON to become an investigator. It's something you can give them some money and they'll give you this binder to study and whatnot. And I didn't follow through with it, but I went quite a bit through. And one of the big things there is you've got to be able to talk to the person. Like
yes,
if somebody just comes forward and says, I saw something, I don't want to talk to you. Okay, that's it. The investigation's over. And
over, yeah,
yeah,
understood,
we're not going to show it. That's the end of it. So
yeah.
basically
And
that's what happened here.
it's the same thing with a crime, and I'm not going to go into like too much details. Like I've been, let's just say, within the past week, I had a case that might have been a potential rape, or maybe not, but at the time, like the person wasn't. And this is with any crime. This is with if the person does not want to come forward, if we don't have enough per, like, let's say a woman says she was raped or something, and like she got punched in the face, and we knew who the suspect was, and we saw the wound on the face. We don't necessarily need her to comply or not. We could just say, hey, you know, we have a felony that was committed. We have this grievous injury, and we know who did it. But in a case where it's not that clean cut, and the person doesn't want to put pen to paper, it makes it hard to go after the crime. If not impossible, you need a victim and you need a complainant. So it's always like the first thing we try to establish when going after like a case. If we're going to try to establish a crime occurred, you need a complainant. You need to have someone come forward. You need to have them put pen to paper. We're going to need that in order to go after this crime. Because if we don't have a complainant, then we really don't have a crime here. And a lot of times that's how it goes. And it's like, it almost seems similar in the world of like what you were saying with the MUFON investigation. We need, and the complainant would be the witness. We need a witness, and they have to be able to put pen to paper. They have to bring themselves forward, because if we don't have that, what do we have? We have just an
Right.
email on a page, and anybody could do that. Anybody could fake a
Right.
phone call, fake an email.
Right. Yeah, certainly. There were certain things that we, because MUFON gave it up, then an average ufologist, like me or you, could come along and say, "All right, I it might be real, so let me look into it. Then, if you don't want to look into it, I'll carry on and keep." And that's what we did in our little team. We looked into it. And then there's certain things we couldn't do, which even MUFON couldn't do, and one of them is if you have we had some emails that were given to us, and they had, in the source of the email, it shows you what IP address it came from. And we tracked it down to, okay, there's a certain internet service provider here that was dealing with that. Could we go and ask them,
Yeah.
who is this, who's this person that sent this email through? Because they have the information, but,
Yes.
we're not police officers, so we have no jurisdiction. We can't get them in there. Of course, the detectives, I think, might have asked them, can we look at this? And they said,
Okay.
no, we can't
They would need a
because,
warrant. They would probably
yeah,
need a warrant signed by a judge in order to
that's right.
provide that information legally, without them violating some sort of confidentiality with their customers.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So
So
and
how are you
and
going to
and
do
then
that?
on
Unless
this
you're the
case,
NSA or something.
we don't have a crime per se. This is just an investigation. So unless somehow these photos were associated with like a dead body turning up somewhere, and then the witness being the person that they think is the suspect for, like if this tied into an actual crime that they could go after somebody with some sort of like a felony case or something,
Right.
maybe they could start trying to get paperwork signed by a judge to say, hey, this is what's holding up our investigation. We need a judge to sign this. We need to get that IP address. We think the suspect, it came from, what I'm saying? If we had
Right.
like a major crime, they could
That's right.
probably start putting some wheels in motion. But for something like this, what do we really have? We have a group of people who are interested in something that just a lot of people have an interest in, something really peculiar, and something that
Right.
might have some truth to it. So yeah, I could see how something like that could
Yeah.
hinder the investigation.
Right. And we could just go back one picture back there. Well, I'll explain something about that. This is the picture I was talking about that it showed something floating up in the air. You can see the shadow of one thing sitting on a table and another
Yes.
one doesn't have a shadow. So obviously it's floating. And the description said, yes, these objects or whatever just floated and they took a picture of it or whatever. So, okay, so this is like part of the Isaac testimony.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure somewhere in there he said, you know, this was done with the NSA or something. Somebody said it was with the NSA. So I went and filed a Freedom of Information Act request. I'm from
Yeah.
Canada, and you're able to do that in the States. It's so easy. You know, you just file this request to the NSA and ask them, you know, I gave them the details of the case, this Isaac CARET case. Did you ever do it? I just wanted to see what they would say back, and I
Yeah.
think I did a fairly good job of explaining what it was. I don't know if I had any pictures or not in there, but I got the email or I got a real letter back from them mailed to me, and basically said, no, we have not had anything to do with this at this time. At this, you know, was so I published that on our drone team forum, and of course, people are saying, "Well, you didn't do it right, and you got to write this and you got to write that." I thought, no, this is like a. I'm not going to keep going and going. If they want to say no and lie, you can't stop a liar from lying, right?
Yeah.
If, if they don't want to reveal this information, they're not going to
Yeah.
reveal. It would have been
They're just going
really
to keep
lucky.
it. I mean, they wouldn't even show their hand that like, oh well, we have this, but we've redacted this. They might
Right,
just say, and there might be, and this wouldn't shock me in the least. There might be a classification for a document that would verify a case like this that falls into what the Disclosure Project and Stephen Greer has been talking about, and any other major researcher, if you've looked far enough into this matter and you believe that there's some truth to some of these black projects. Once the money goes into something with national security and the Department of Defense, it falls into these what they've classified as special access programs. And these special access programs, the level of clearance that you would need to even access one of these programs, I think is beyond the scope of what a Freedom of Information Act would allow you access to. It just
right,
becomes something that is they consider or has been classified through some level of classifications so sensitive that this is not even reachable by a common civilian through freedom of information. It would just be off the table. This
right,
is an active program. It's actively dealing with national security for the United States. And because of the sensitive nature of this program and the fact that any disclosure of any information of this program could put the national security of this country at risk, it has been deemed something above the classification, whatever that would be, above top secret, and then therefore any Freedom of Information Act would just yield you nothing. It would just be unknown or it doesn't exist, even if it did, So
right.
because God forbid, somebody tips their hand even a little bit, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, now this guy knows, now the public knows,
Right.
now the Russians know, now the North Koreans know, and now everybody wants to get their hands into our cookie jar, and we could have
Yeah.
just kept our mouths shut, and this would have saved us from a whole lot of headache, So at some
Yeah.
level, I'm just pro, like why, you said what was the formal word from the FOIA request that you followed that you filed?
Yeah. Well, their answer basically was no. We never had such a program.
Okay.
We just basically didn't have that. Um,
Fair enough, but you at least tried, and I think that was a noble
yeah.
effort because, if there were some truth to this, maybe something would come out, maybe an angle of some of this would come out. But at the
Sure.
same time, I could easily see how something like this would just not be in the purview of somebody being able to file for a FOIA for a black ops program. It just
Yeah.
wouldn't exist. You just
Right.
wouldn't have
Right.
access to it because it's an act of, clearly, if in 2008 or 2009 if there were some truth to this and they were test flighting, doing some test flights for this technology that they've been working for decades and have probably dumped, countless millions of dollars into, and have had years of secrecy, like why would you spoil that, by saying,
Right.
oh, just let somebody file a FOIA and just talk about it, So
Right.
anyhow, so what was your next step after that, after you had?
Well, okay, so the first part is all the witness, like the pictures, the whistleblower things. There was about 5, I guess, of these things. There was Isaac, Raj, Chad, Stephen,
Yeah.
that, that came forward and said, like either by email or by these photo sharing websites, like I got a picture of this too. None of those people could be, well, except for Raj. There was some email that went back and forth. I think like overnight, one day or something, he answered some emails on the forum, and then that was it. He just stopped. So there's we don't really know if this is different people or not, but all of that information, I guess I would say, like the original pictures, they all were linked together by that image that I had there, where the whistleblower document had pictures of these symbols on it, and so did the
Yes.
photographs. So the shape of the craft. So that was that. And once that information got out onto coast to coast, other people hear it, and then you get the people that said, "Oh, yeah, I saw that. I know what I saw. Uh, don't question me. It was exactly like." And then when you'd ask them, well, which one was it? Oh, and it was exactly like that one. They just had visual, uh, you know,
But no
recollection of
pictures.
it.
Like
That's
I was
right.
there and I was out there and I saw a similar type of
Right.
drone, but I can't back it up with photos or anything.
That's
But like,
right. Yeah.
I'm a witness now.
And I was involved in, I would email these people, some of the group members. They found out who they were. We tracked them down or whatever. We emailed them and contacted them. We might have called, asked Linda Moulton how, who are these people? Can we talk to them? And it went on and on. And every single one of them was basically like, yeah, we don't have pictures, but we know what we saw.
Yeah.
Uh, One of the fellows from Washington, he painted something. He painted a picture. Oh, it's an interesting story or whatever. He paints his picture. He put it on some social media thing. We found out who he was. I ended up talking to him on the phone, emailing him, uh, and
I think I
then
saw that. It was like a sketch. It almost like a black and
yeah,
white sketch.
that's right. Yeah, I think it was like a spray painted sketch.
Yeah, and it looked very, very similar to like one of the ones on
Right, right,
the side shot of the Chad sighting with the antenna on top, the original drone, just with the circle and the antenna.
exactly.
Yeah, I think I saw that. And
Yeah,
you're saying
and
that he claimed that he just did that per his sighting, not per the photos that were released. He was
right,
at
right.
his
Yeah,
claim
that's
at
what he
least.
claimed exactly. He had a little torn out piece on the corner. Like, was that a date that you tore it out or what? And he didn't really explain it to me. I talked to him initially about it. I said, do you want to go on and talk with somebody, like talk with Linda Moulton Howe? And he said, oh yeah, I'll do anything. And he did actually. He communicated with, I think it was Linda.
Okay.
He might have even went on a radio show on Coast to Coast. I can't remember exactly, but he had his name out there. Like, this is his personal name was out there.
Yeah.
Uh, I know I mailed him something and he received it. So there was a contact there, and then all of a sudden, it kind of just dries up, and he implied to me like, "Oh, I smoke a lot of marijuana. I might have been high that day. I don't know what happened," and,
Oh,
and it just like,
okay.
okay, that was
Mm.
the end of it. Now I don't know. Did he like? There was questions that I had for him that weren't being answered.
Yep.
So
Yep.
did he finally just get sick of me poking at his story, or did he get,
Yeah.
you could look at it a number of different ways.
Okay.
There was, and there was another
But you
fellow. Yeah, go
But
ahead.
you had to do your diligence. You
Yeah.
can't have somebody like this come forward and you can't not ask him a couple
Oh,
dozen questions because,
that's right.
you gotta be able to with that same sort of concept with the witness that has to be verified. You have to be able to ask questions that show that this story holds water. And if the more questions you ask, the person starts getting cold feet and starts saying, "Oh, well, maybe this was drug induced. Maybe I did," and it starts to put their whole story into question. So they have to. You got a torture test. Unfortunately, I guess if you come forward as a witness, it's almost like the cost you're going to have to incur. You're going to have somebody probably come at you and torture test you, and then see if because you got a big claim,
Right.
does it hold water or does it not? And that has to be proven, especially when we have 5 other witnesses that effectively fell by the wayside when it comes to this standard of being able to prove or not prove.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. So, it's kind of discouraging when you're talking with something and somebody, and then all of a sudden, that's at the end of it. Okay. So we had other witnesses. We had Ted. was his name, and he actually went on Coast to Coast, talked. He was he had stories and whatnot that he told. He never had any pictures, but he had the story. So we're following down all these witnesses, and we said to Linda, "Can Linda Moulton, how could can you make us put us in contact with this guy?" And she said, "Yeah, okay, sure." So I talked with him. Actually, kind of became friendly with him. Uh, I just disappeared there for a second.
Okay.
Oh, there we
We're
go.
back.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm talking with this Ted fellow for a while. I find out that's not his real name, and whatever. Because that's fine. Okay, so he's hiding behind a different name.
Yeah.
Uh, then he's starting to tell me other things, and he was starting to elaborate on stories. Saying, "Oh, this," and it was like really far out stuff, like
Yeah.
way. This is making stuff up, basically. And I thought, okay, well, this is curious. Wonder what's going on. And then he would disappear for a while and come back. And I'd say, well, did you see this thing we posted on? And he wouldn't answer. He said he was away. I found out, no, he is logging into the system and looking. So he was definitely, I caught him lying a number of times.
Yeah.
Uh, he ended up, he passed away. And we found out that, okay, this, somehow we found out that this was his MO. He's like a pathological liar.
Oh, okay.
And I did find out a number of times if he ever questioned anything or if ever I asked him a question, he would get extremely mad. He'd still want to be my friend, but he'd get extremely mad.
Yep.
It's like, oh, this, I'm gonna, not saying threatening things to me, but just getting upset that somebody questioned his, or he'd see something on the forum, somebody would ask a question, say, well, what do you mean by this? And he would get upset that they were kind of breaking his story up. Uh,
Okay. And what was he claiming? He was one of
well,
the
he had
just a
claimed
witness with no
that
pictures.
he, what, sorry,
He was just a witness who hadn't taken pictures, but he saw these craft. He
that's
saw.
right. Yeah, he
Okay.
said he had worked for some government institution, and he had seen this thing flying around the outside, and he told me about how he saw it. He walked outside and he saw it disappearing and moving, and he kind of made up his own little story there. I
Oh.
personally believe that he was making things up, and I learned things
Okay.
about liars. I Through my life, I hadn't had a lot of liars that I gave them the time of day, but I did give him a lot of time to try to come out. And I was hoping that he would somehow reveal. I would ask him things in the forum, and no, he wasn't going to say, "Oh, sorry, I lied," or anything. People don't do that, right? They're not going to
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
"I'm a liar."
Because
But
then they're exposed publicly, which is almost like one of the biggest fears of people. I think the fact that we rely so much on each other in society and how we're all socially connected. I think like intrinsically in human nature, like I was just talking about this with a friend, like why people do stolen valor. I'm not sure if you're familiar with what that is.
yeah,
Like somebody pretending to be somebody in the military.
right.
People love to get the admiration of people who are great and people who are excellent. A lot of times they don't want to put the work in, and that's why people lie, because they want to get the admiration of being great and being important without having to put the work in, or having to be something who is really like the real thing. So that's why people kind of pretend to be something they're not. And the power of being publicly shamed, like through history, we know like a lot of times people would be excommunicated from societies, like, hey, you're banished to the mountains, or they would tar and feather somebody. And now when you walk through publicly, your public square, everybody knows you to be a fraud and a liar. So it's like the power of being shamed is a very, to this day, is a very important thing. They even talk about like
Hmm.
people who are bullied on the internet and like committing suicide just by being bullied, and like how
Right.
how terrible it is to be publicly shamed and publicly humiliated. So yeah, so if somebody's lying, yeah, the last thing they're probably going to do is publicly admit that they've been lying. They might just switch their story up and then just stop communicating with you. But there's a very, I would say there's probably like a low chance somebody would have the courage, if they lied, to say, "Hey, nah, yep, you actually caught me. I lied. I'm sorry," and come forward with a public apology. It's
Right.
probably
Right.
not in the same sort of character for somebody who would just lie in the first place. But
Yeah.
so so it turns out that this witness was a dead end also.
Well, yeah, and a lot of people knew. At the first, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I thought, okay, you've got a story here. This is my my self described duty to ask you questions and that. So, we went on for a while, and to me, it seemed like he lied to be a friend of mine. He wanted to,
Okay.
uh, he wanted a friend, and it didn't seem like he had too many other friends.
Got
So
it.
it's almost like that was his reason. So, okay, I learned something about lying and
Yeah,
try,
human nature, maybe
yeah,
that like to try to be popular, try to be cool, like, yeah, yeah, hey, I'm gonna fit in, I saw one of these, you want to hang out with me, we can talk about it,
right,
and it's like
right.
whatever somebody's motives were, maybe just because they wanted someone to talk to or someone to think that they were important.
Yeah, right,
So,
for sure.
unfortunately,
Yeah.
but
And we did a lot of this in this drone team. We kind of any time we scoured the internet, basically, anytime somebody mentioned it, we would try to track them down and find out who they were. One fellow said, "Oh yeah, I saw this, and I made a painting of it." I said, "Okay, well, can you show me the painting? Like, send me a picture." Oh well, I usually sell my paintings. So
I gotcha. Yeah.
okay, so
Second, you start going to that next level of research, all of a sudden their story starts to fall apart.
right.
Well, convenient, like the guy that always has a nice sports car, but it's always in the shop getting some sort of work done. You know,
Yeah,
it's like
exactly. Yeah. So
everybody's got to
yeah, it was kind of
everybody.
around that time when I found out, like the story of Ted was concluded. We didn't see. This is in about 2012, and we didn't really see any new information that was valuable. I mean, some people could still find little images that looked like these drones or whatever, but since the original people were gone, okay, there's nothing to follow up on really. We did everything we could. And I wouldn't say it was a waste of my time either because I learned so much from it. Learned a lot about people and a lot about
Yeah,
the UFO scene, you might say.
yeah,
And then it was about I think it was 2017. One of our other fellows in the group here, EVS, he goes by. He sent me an image of these pictures from the Empire State Building, and this is the last picture on my list. You might want to have a picture. This was
which one is it? Is it
there,
this?
yeah, that
Is
one
it the?
there. Yeah,
Yep, this one right here.
there's quite a few of these images. This is just one of them. I didn't send you all of them, but there's a few of
Huh.
them, and these were images done in the 1930s. These were paintings that were done on the walls and the ceilings and the floor of yeah, it was the Empire State Building, and they had been covered up for years, like renovations or whatever, and new plaster and new metal sheets put on top of them because it was like an older design.
Yeah,
So it was about, I think it was about 2017 when some artists decide to restore these things, like restore the images. And then pictures started showing up on the internet. So this is how this EVS guy, he found them and he forwarded it to me. And there is a lot of similarities in the way this picture is drawn. Some of the little circles in that, some of them have these arcs going around. So it's an
yep.
artistic
If we
style from the
compare
time.
that to this, if we compare that to, oh, I think I lost the share. Let me go back to that. But yeah,
It
for
was an
that original
artistic
picture that,
style at that time that, hey, this is how people painted imagery. It's like an abstract art type of thing that had been covered up for a long time, and it was strikingly similar to the artwork that was done around, the drone, whatever the paperwork that came from the whistleblower, and there's a
yeah,
lot
what
of similarities to that.
the schematics, whatever that was, that
Yeah, that's right.
what was the term?
The map.
Primer linguistics. I
Yeah,
think that was
language
the term.
analysis primer, LAP, I think it was the terminology that they were using. So I thought, okay, now there's historical evidence of this picture. Now it could have been that, you know, maybe aliens or government or whatever, they used that as a basis. I mean, there's always answers to find a way around it. It just depends on which side you're biased to thinking. And I
Yeah.
tried for a long time to be in the center. I mean, there's sometimes that I believed the stuff and sometimes that I disbelieved it. And you know, at this point in time now, I disbelieve that anything there was real. So yeah, that's the language
Okay.
analysis
So yeah, I was
primer.
able to pull that back up, and then we were just comparing that for whatever reason, and just keep losing that. But we were comparing that with the original picture that you had shown of
Right.
uh, For some reason, that keeps crashing on
Oh,
me.
from the
But yeah,
Empire
so the
State.
original picture we were showing of the
Huh.
Empire State Building drawings that were there, they were
Right.
for some reason. Let's see if I can pull that back up. Um, it was for some reason similar in ways. None of the characters actually match, but we could see some similarities that we were looking
Exactly.
at.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
There's. It's definitely different in many ways, but the same in some important ways, I thought. And that was
and
just one picture.
just the way that it's laid out. If we see
Right.
some of the, let's see if I can pull that back up. There we go. So that was that
Yeah,
compared
exactly.
to the other picture. So you have the circles, we have the lines connecting them. So schematically, there's some similarities there. Between this and this, but to play devil's advocate also there's a lot of differences too.
Oh,
I
for
mean, it just
sure.
happens to be some
Exactly.
circles that were in a drawing, but I mean,
Right.
none of the characters match, none
No,
of the lines, the way that the lines are curved, there's no match there, the
no.
way that the curves are. And I even and what was impressive to me when I originally got these high resolution scans here, you were able to zoom in on these. And I mean, you were able to zoom in like very, very fine. Like if I'm going to circle like this area, like right here, for example,
Oh,
you were
yeah.
able to zoom in and like, I don't know if I can do it now, but like, yeah, like it even like, and I could even do it when I originally downloaded the original ones, and it was a high resolution. Like you could pull this, and the way that I'm pulling in here, are you able to see my zoom
Yeah.
shot right
Oh,
now?
yeah. Yeah.
See, it gets pixelated, but the way that when I downloaded the original high resolution photos, you could zoom right up to the finest detail, and it was all
Oh,
crystal
exactly.
clear.
Yeah.
So it just made me believe that whoever originally uploaded them or created them, there was a high resolution scan, a very high resolution scan of a very
Right.
detailed photo. So there's, so that, like you said, there's some similarities, but
Right.
back to where you were at, this basically led to, if I'll just cancel the share and I'll just go back to, let's see if we can just go back to the,
Yeah. So, when I had been disillusioned by the case a few times, especially with these people lying to me and not getting any response back from the originators, and it seeming like, okay, we don't really have an artifact, right? We don't really have a working copy of this. We got a picture of it, but
yep,
that's not reproduced. We've got promises that it happened, but
yeah,
we ran into a lot of dead ends. Now, there's still people that believe, like in our team, there's still people that believe that something that it's real and all that. I'm not one of them anymore. I
okay,
believe that there may have been different reasons, and like I mentioned to you before, uh, one of my theories, listening to the ideas of this Project Bluebeam, is that some government, whatever, or overseer, somebody high up, maybe did this to find out what the reaction of the public would be when there was a lot of information. Because, you know, to make somebody believe something, if it was just one fact or one word of something, whether it's true or false, you could say, "All right, I don't know if it's true." But when you have a lot of different things, and in this case, we had all those check boxes clicked off. There was a lot of different points to come. Then you could say, yeah, it's more believable now. It's happening in real time. These images are
yeah,
coming through. So that, I think, is one way to trick the public. Now, it didn't trick a lot of people, but I think if somebody was trying to eventually come to do this, and if people want to look into this Project Bluebeam, it's the idea that some government, whatever, would try to trick the people that there's aliens coming down and that this is the new Messiah, and this is like Jesus doesn't exist or whatever, or,
okay,
Allah doesn't exist, but these aliens, they're doing real things, and this is how you would trick it, and this is how you would trick people into thinking that something's real. Or at least in the drone case, it was a way to find out what people would believe and what they wouldn't believe. And right away, there was a lot of people that come up and said, "Oh, the pictures can be faked," and they certainly could have been at the time. I mean, it wasn't easy to do, but other people could have drawn like a lot of those images of the UFO that could have all been done in 3D modeling. Later on, it was found that the one picture that I showed there that was above the hydro pole, that was very interesting because it had shadows in certain
yeah,
directions. And
yeah,
based on those shadows, you could extrapolate how far away the sun was, and that made those shadows. Because if you could somehow make a 3D model yourself, and there was one fellow on there, he went by the name of SPF 33. Uh, and he actually was pretty good at making these 3D models, and he drew a picture and he placed the sun where exactly where it would be. I tried at the time. I didn't really know anything about 3D modeling software, but I forced myself to learn it, and I tried it too, and so did a few other people. They were good at 3D modeling, and they tried it too. And it turned out in all those cases that the sun had to be like only one or two lengths of the drone away. It wasn't a distant thing; like it wasn't far away. It had to have been pretty close, and
Yeah.
that would have happened if you made a 3D model and you placed the light source, with only like two two or three lengths, like maybe 100 feet away or 50 feet away, then it would have
Okay.
made shadows. So now you could say, well, yeah, it could have been faked that way, or this device or whatever, if it's altering gravity, maybe it's altering light too. Because gravity and light is affected by gravity, so
Yeah.
maybe this thing is doing something. They said it was disappearing in and out. So some people thought, well, then good, that's proof that it is supernatural or extraterrestrial. And other people would say, well, because the light source was close, well, that's proof it was done in a 3D modeling software. So you had both
Yeah.
sides of
Yeah. So
the
it's easy
story.
without the actual witnesses coming forward and without any sort of solid evidence to back any of these pictures or claims or emails up. And is that just to kind of conclude, before we talk any more about Project Bluebeam, just to kind of conclude that, is that the question to you, is that, was it just over the years of you looking into these stories that turned out to be dead end after dead end after unknown? Is that why you ultimately came to the conclusion that you felt like, like, is there still any sort of like question mark over your head that one of these whistleblower, that Isaac or one of these witnesses could have been real, or have you basically come to the conclusion that, for whatever reason, that, because of these dead end after dead end after dead end, that that's just really a moot point to you now, whether or not this is real or not, or is it, there's still some glimmer of hope?
Well, yeah, I guess with anything in life, you have to choose a path. You have to,
That's true.
make a decision. And, but then at the same hand, some things you'll never know. Like we'll never know where we end up when we die until that time comes, and then we'll know
Yeah,
for sure. So
that's true.
to me, I still think there's things that I will never know. And if you went by statistics, like percentage wise, I'm probably 99% right now that it was all faked. But for whatever reason, currently of the mind that it's something like this Project Bluebeam type of idea, is that somebody was testing us out. It's
Yeah,
fairly, I mean, it could have been done by one person, but it was unlikely done by one person. And all the photos in that, they were, I would say, the photos and everything. Yeah, it could be slightly real. I don't know, maybe like 1% or less.
yeah.
Sure, if it came to be true in the future, then just like everyone else, I would say, oh wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, well, yeah, like you said, regardless of this is, with this unknown of whether this is real or not, it was certainly complicated. It certainly seemed to be, especially with the high resolution scans and the proper, almost it seemed like a very sophisticated formatting for how an SOP would be written if there was a government program, and
Yeah.
how, if you start checking the boxes of how complicated this was. And even when I actually flew out to Vegas one time, and I live in New York. And back in 2009, I think it was like late November 2009. A buddy of mine and I flew out to Vegas from New York. Specifically, I mean, we had a little bit of a trip and we enjoyed Vegas a little bit, but the main premise of us going out to Vegas was to go to a crash retrieval conference out at some hotel in Vegas. And I remember Tom Davis was there, and I actually met him back in Vegas.
Oh, the Bluebeam. Oh, yes, the Project Bluebeam documentary. Yeah, um, it was something I found on BitChute. Yeah, it was called, okay, Project Bluebeam full documentary. That's the name of it, and it's on BitChute.
the listeners, I could put a link to this documentary. I'm trying to pull it up here real quick. I got the email that you had
Yeah.
sent me. Let's just see if it's here. You said you sent a
It's a good
link.
summary, and what you said about if it was all faked, then it would have to have been a lot of work put into it. And certainly, I agree that there's no way that one person could have done all these things. I don't think. I mean, you'd have to be pretty good, or you have to have been prepared beforehand anyway to
Yeah,
have written up the everything. So that's why I think, if it was fake, then it had to have been some larger team that
yeah.
knew. And exactly, like, we couldn't track a lot of these people down. We we tried, we couldn't get their real names, and it's out of the first five witnesses or so that actually put this forward. Not one of them we could find. There was even a letter sent to Linda Moulton Howe, and the return address on the letter didn't exist.
Didn't exist.
So
Okay, so it just gets to the point where, like, if nobody's going to come forward, we have to. And that's my problem moving on with this too. I mean, I still have some hope, just knowing what I know about all the other research I've done, and that I do believe that I firmly believe that there are programs. Uh, not to get too far away from this topic, but there is something going on to the effect of what Bob Lazar claims. There's at some level there's been something recovered. I've done a lot of research on Roswell, and it just all the whistleblowers I've seen come forward, it just don't jive. There's just too much on the side of people coming forward with information and whistleblowers and people that were right on the inside of all these events that have come forward. So I think at
right,
some level there is a strong argument for that. There is some level of reverse engineering going on, and a program like this would fit into there. But
yeah,
like you said, there's just so many question marks over the validity of the information that has come forward. It's hard to be able to jump on this and say, well, I know just because I have a gut feeling. You can't do that. Like, you need something more. And I was able to pull this documentary up. It's posted on bitshoot.com by a user by the name of D'Illuminati. That's the user's name on bitshoot.com. And the title of the documentary is Project. I forget. Does it have a year listed when this came out? No, it doesn't have a year listed.
yeah,
Oh, yeah, 2020. First published on February 24th, 2020 by D'Illuminati on BitChute. And it's a Project Bluebeam documentary. I can kind of just real quick kind of go through some of the main points. If you want to interject either during or afterward, just let me know. I kind of just highlighted some of the things going on in this documentary that are of note, and it goes on how they're what Project Bluebeam is, and like you said, it's going to be, effectively, to sum it up, the second coming of a antichrist, or somebody that could bring together the people of the world in a one world type of religion. And it's going to be a multi-step process, faked by either the government or whoever would be the powers that be. Call it the Illuminati or the government, the secret government that would bring the world together in a one world government and a one world religion, which then you would be able to more easily control the world's population if everybody's on the same page. And the documentary just kind of just backs some of the facts up by saying that there's currently some testing in Fort Huachuca, California, where they do optical devices. So that's a military thing where they could make an image appear that doesn't actually appear. And then they interviewed a doctor, Dr. Michael Persinger, who said he was experimenting with using electromagnetic fields to stimulate or simulate either or, like opiate use, and how opiate use makes people feel happy and joyful, and the endorphins that produces. But you don't actually have to have something bad happen to you. Using electromagnetic fields, you could either simulate like an opiate feeling or a feeling of sadness or fear, which is basically at that point, if you believe that, you could state then, well, if someone's able to control your level of fear with some sort of an electrical signal, at some level they can control you. Say before a war, stimulate fear in the general population using, and like I said, I'm not sure if I'm 100% on, not necessarily, I don't know enough about Project Bluebeam, but let's just hypothetically say like 5G towers, that they're putting these 5G towers and they're sending some sort of a signal out that could stimulate fear. And then they do that right before they have all over the press and the national media that there's a country that's the enemy and we need to go to war. And like, if you could simulate fear in people, then they're going to be more willing to want to go
Yeah.
satiate their fear with having their country go to war to say, oh, now you're being protected. And Jordan Maxwell was interviewed. He talks about Norio Hayakawa, who have had a guest on here at Not Media. Norio is a big proponent that he thinks the government is going to pull off a trick in the countries to like stage an alien invasion. And so he's a proponent of that. I've heard Richard Dolan talk about that, and he's somebody who's well respected in the UFO research field. A false flag type of event, and originally Project Bluebeam was put forward by a man named Serge Monast,
Monast.
and he was, like I had already stated, he was saying that there's going to be a new world order put together by an antichrist, and it's going to be a way to control the masses. And I don't know if this is related to his type of research, because it may be or may not be, like you were saying with the CARET investigation. But Serge became increasingly paranoid. He would have his children homeschooled. I think some of his children were taken away from him, and then it said he was arrested and soon therefore afterwards died of a heart attack. I think the documentary said he was only 51, but it's it, it's hard to quantify these sorts of stories. I know. Are you familiar with the book Behold a Pale Horse? This was like
No.
okay, so I don't. I have the book, and I think I've read it, but this was years and years ago. Maybe when I was first getting into my UFO research, I've at least read parts of the book, and it was written by a man named William Cooper. He was a veteran who then got into this whole like thing about the New World Order and how the government's going to be, like the control of the world and the Illuminati and the government. It was all a book about that, and it almost like Behold a Pale Horse almost became like the Bible of what you would consider back in like the mid to late 2000s, like a conspiracy type of person, like the person that was like, oh, the government, everyone's had to get us, and they're all doing this to under, like Behold the Pale Horse had some truth in there. And but it was also like almost like the Bible for someone that felt that there was a new world order and there was an Illuminati, and you would read this book and you'd see it would bring the light to you to show that, hey, like there is this group that this with bad intentions that's trying to control us. But William Cooper actually, without looking this up right now because I don't want to spend too much time on it, he was actually killed in a shootout, I believe, at his own house with like a local sheriff's department. I don't know exactly the terms or the premise of what happened, but it all kind of adds up to further his place in this history of UFO lore and conspiracy lore, that he was killed by an entity of either the state or local government, and like who knows why, because I work in law enforcement. I mean, I don't know what the call was for. It could have been even as simple as this guy, I don't know, is what I'm saying. Is I don't know. It could have been as simple as this guy like became very paranoid, developed a drinking problem. Then the police got called because there was a man that has access to guns that was threatening people, and he was drunk, and then all of a sudden the sheriff show up at his house, and then he pulls out a gun, and then the sheriffs have to respond by shooting him because a drunk man pulled out. What I'm saying? Like it could have been. There's a possibility that his death involved with a local or whatever level of law enforcement entity this was completely unrelated to the fact that he wrote the book Behold the Pale Horse. It might have been something going on with him, and the law enforcement agents that showed up said, hey, what would you do if you were a police officer? You showed up to a man's house and we got a call for a drunken man with a gun, and then he pointed a gun at me, So it's like I don't know is what I'm saying. And like the fact that this guy Serge Manas died of a heart attack soon after he was brought into custody for whatever reason. I don't know why he was arrested. I don't know what his health condition was. I don't know if he had a cardiac issue. What I'm saying? There's so many factors in like I'm sure it works into the lore that, oh, well, he was killed. It's convenient that he died at 51. Like, yeah, it's convenient, but people do die at 51. And people, I was just watching a documentary about Sylvester Stallone. It's very popular right now on Netflix, and it goes over like his whole life and basically like all of his cinematography. This was a fact I didn't know. He lost a son who was in one of the Rocky movies. The son that starred in one of the Rocky movies with him, that son died when he was only 36. And I started looking into that. So, oh my God, that's like so young. And it turns out that the Sylvester Stallone's son died from atherosclerosis and then a heart attack. And then I was kind of looking into that further, and I said, well, that's highly uncommon. And then one of his friends came on and said, well, he was overweight, he was a heavy smoker. I said, okay, I used to be a EMT. You start checking the boxes off. Like theoretically, somebody in their mid to late 30s or early to mid 40s could die of a heart attack if they're a heavy smoker, they're overweight, they're not watching their cholesterol. So it's like there's other factors that like can claim somebody's life that are unaccounted for. But if there's somebody involved in like some sort of research, all of a sudden it's everyone's going to jump on that bandwagon right away and be like, oh, well, he was killed because. So I don't know is what I'm saying. But just to sum up the rest of this documentary real quick, and then you can comment. Project Bluebeam is broken down to 4 steps. The first step would be the breakdown of all archaeological history. Then they interviewed a man named Aaron Mayer, for example, and he stated that there was some new archaeological site that was dug up, and stated that the Philistines, who, from a biblical perspective, were considered like Goliath was a Philistine, and they talked about them very like in a disparaging way, and that David slayed the giant, so they were very barbaric and very simple, but they found a Philistine culture. They're claiming that, and they're saying that they were a very sophisticated culture based on the archaeological dig. And this documentary is trying to pitch that as an example, and then they're also trying to pitch that like faking earthquakes, and then using that to find new archaeological discoveries. Like, for example, they use the Star Child skull, which has been proven to have fibers woven into the skull that makes it stronger than human bone, but not human. They said the mother was human and the father was an unknown. They think it's some sort of a hybrid. And this is an actual artifact that they found, which could undermine the history of what the Bible and what certain religions and certain mainstream theories state. Step 2, a gigantic space hologram with different narratives per local geographic region would be shown. And they were basically saying that like could show like a new world type of Christ, and one of the guys was saying maybe using like a Soviet supercomputer, they could have audio being beamed to people. I mean, I don't really know the technology, if it's actually legitimate or not. I haven't looked too much into this, but some people think that smart meters in people's houses, how they have this whole new push for everything has to be connected from your TV to your microwave. Everything's all linked together now, and Wi-Fi, how that this could be used to influence people. Secret experiments were being done. They interviewed a Dr. James Cattell, and a Howard Blower was given LSD without him knowing it, and effectively that caused the man to, I don't know if it caused him to, like what the fallout of him being given LSD, but it's not morally correct. And the doctor stated that, hey, I was just working for the Army. I didn't know what I was giving him. It could have been, I think they were saying, like, joked around the documentary, like, could have been dog piss for all I know. I don't know what, it would taint the experiment if I was a doctor doing a double-blind experiment and I knew what I was giving this patient. So he tried to, like, absolve himself from any sort of wrongdoing. Step 3, two-way communication with God, and they are stating that using extra low frequencies, which tend to travel farther. And I know that from your, you did for Unihedron, you did a poster of the electromagnetic spectrum and how low frequency waves tend to go further. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, this is why you can have a ham radio and pick up signals from AM from like 800, 1200 miles away, but
Yeah, they'll
FM
bounce off. Yeah.
fades out real quick. So FM would be very high frequency waves and AM would be
Right.
long waves, right? I mean, this is the sort
Right.
of,
Right.
all right. So there we go. So that's Alex Jones is stating, I think he, truthwars.com. I think he's the curator of that, and he's well known in the UFO conspiracy theory community. Some people are proponents and some people aren't of him, but he's saying using pulse TV computer images along with radio waves can influence the nervous system. And step 4, a false flag alien invasion. And I've heard this before, and like I said, I've met Richard Dolan once or twice. I used to run a company. The one time I went up to Canada, a second time I went to a disclosure meeting, and I met Richard Dolan, and actually took a picture with him for my clothing line, which was supposed to be to get facts about the whole world of alien investigation and UFO investigation out to the public. It's something I was working on back in around 2015, but I respect Richard Dolan's research. I've read a couple of his books, and I just feel like he's very level-headed. And if there was like a public voice that is like teaching at a collegiate level, which he actually did teach a class on this whole topic, that that would be somebody I would respect in the sense that um, he speaks the truth about as much as we know about an accurate history of what's going on with the whole UFO alien situation. So we were just talking about just concluding talking about the Project Bluebeam documentary on BitChute and the four steps. If I could sum those up, it's just going to be the breakdown of all archaeological history, and then some sort of and this is per Serge Monast, who was the originator of the theory of Project Bluebeam, and the premise of that has been supported by other researchers throughout the years. And so it's the four steps that Project Bluebeam of basically faking a second coming of an antichrist with the premise of bringing the world together under the control of one world government, which we don't have now. We have a world that's very much divided by different um, people with different beliefs about our history and religion and science. Is a world that's very divided about why are we all here and what are we doing here and what our purpose is. But I mean, theoretically, if you wanted to control the whole world in a very convenient way, you could first get the whole world to believe in one premise of what the reality of life is. And then if you've had that whole world now follow that one leader into saying, hey, I'll lead you into the light. And this is the truth about our world and where we're all going and why we're here. You'd be able to control the whole world a lot easier now. You wouldn't have a lot of these wars. And you would, I mean, on a pro side, but on a negative side, if the person was up to no good, they can control the world to do whatever they wanted at that point because
Right.
everybody would be following. So the four steps are broken down into the breakdown of all archaeological history, and you would have some sort of artifacts that were faked that would say, hey, there's a different history to this planet than has originally been brought forward. A giant space-based hologram with new technology to say, hey, this is a vision of the Antichrist and what they're going to bring forward to this world and the truth they're going to bring. A two-way communication with God. However, if that's done through radio waves and low wave frequencies, that can travel long distances, supported by different theories. And I know Alex Jones was talking about this. And finally, for step 4 and Project Bluebeam would be a false flag alien invasion in every major city of the world, much like the movie Independence Day, where a big saucer was over every major city on the planet. But and for Project Bluebeam's purposes, this would be not real ships. This would be some sort of either a fake ship or a projected hologram of a ship. And then, with the summation of these 4 steps together, it would be a way to have everybody fall under one world religion and then have a common threat we would all be scared against as a world. And then that Antichrist could then control the people or lead the people into, hey, this will be the future now because we have this common enemy. We have to fight against this common enemy, and you have to believe me in the way I'm, and give up your liberties and let me lead you into the light. So that would be and then just to kind of sum up the whole documentary, Obama, with a New World Order, stated that when he became president, there'd be a non-proliferation and disarmament. I believe he was talking about nuclear weapons, promotion of peace and security, preservation of our planet, and a global economy that supports the advancement and opportunity for all people. And those sound like all really positive things. So I don't know, like the maker of this documentary threw that in there for like a New World Order, but like, unless he's saying that like that's the cover story for a much more sinister reason that the world should come together. And then Henry Kissinger, that's how the documentary ended off at a Bilderberg meeting in 1992, stating basically that if there was an outside threat to the world, um, leaders would eliminate that threat. And then, like, he used an example of like right now, if UN troops came into Los Angeles to restore order for some of the craziness going on there, people would be outraged. Like, what that, what are you doing in our country? And, this isn't some sort of a military occupation. But if there was a major threat to the world, people might welcome UN troops in and say, hey, you're here to save us. And you had stated that in two main points from a article from the was it India Times, that the two main points of Project Bluebeam are to abolish all Christian and traditional religious religions in order to replace them with a one world religion based on a cult of man, and secondly, to abolish all identities and national pride in order to establish a world identity and a world pride. So, if you just want to comment on any of that and what your beliefs are and how you fell into this line of beliefs.
Yeah. Well, sure. It's not so much that something like this is going to happen, it's that there's certain people or groups of people that want it to happen. And
Okay.
those people probably have enough money to go ahead and produce, like this CARET drone thing. Maybe
Yeah.
they have money just to test it on the public and see, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? What do we have to do if we want to make this real?
Yeah.
Uh, it's not so much that I know it's going to happen. There's been talk that right now we're probably in World War III. There's a lot of people that think that this is World War III, where there's a lot of different countries having wars with each other, and
Yeah.
there's discussion that uh, after a war there's going to be this, like aliens come and take over the world, and after World War III this is going to happen, and the next step will be this one world order. So there are I guess people that predict things that say, this is the steps that's going to happen. The next after the war is going to be this. So who knows? Maybe someone will try something like this. And how do you make people believe it? Well, obviously, this drone case was not the case to make people believe it, because right off the bat, so many people said, "Oh, the pictures are fake." But if something real started happening, let's say, who knows, missiles went over some city and blew it up or whatever, and the government said, "Well, no, that's not our missiles. It's not ours. It must have been aliens that blew this up." And
Yeah.
you know, maybe it's not missiles, but maybe it's something like an explosion on the ground or laser weapon or something like that. And
Yeah.
so that would make it believable to a large percentage of people. Now, not
Yeah.
everyone's going to believe it, but if there's a large enough percentage, then they will sway the governments to say, "Okay, look, we need to all get together, and the entire world has to get together and solve this problem." I mean, we
For
saw
sure.
the whole world get together in the last 3 years and solve a problem.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Everybody
Yep.
walked down. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it wasn't too hard. I mean, it wasn't too hard to do that. How hard is it going to be to do the next step? Would be unbelievable for a lot, but could
Yeah,
very
but if
well.
people really felt like their destruction was imminent, like we saw, like you just had an example of with coronavirus, if everybody across the planet had a general consensus that this threat, it could potentially kill me, kill my family, and I'll do whatever I have to do to
Right.
work together as a planet to solve this threat. And I'm just going to use a quick example. I know, without getting too much into this, I know there's been a lot of contention over this over the years with the Gulf of Tonkin incident and the Vietnam War. I'm not sure how much you actually know about that,
Not
but
too much. No.
there are people that stated that, um, at the time, the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which was an incident that occurred obviously in the Gulf of Tonkin, where there was, I think it was the North Vietnamese bombed a American naval ship, and I think 6 members of the U.S. military were killed. Um, there was a lot. There was a That was the premise that Vietnam got ramped up. There was a presence in while Kennedy was president, um, and I think it was Lyndon B. Johnson that took over afterwards. After Kennedy was assassinated and Johnson came into power, there was a presence of this like proxy war, the foundation for that, and it was a very low troop number. It was very just more like a presence, almost like we have a denuclearized zone in between North and South Korea. But then after this Gulf of Tonkin incident, all of a sudden that was the go point. Like, no, 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 this threat is real. It's go time. We got to ramp up. We got to starting a draft. We're getting tens of thousands of troops over there. This is going to be a real deal, full blown war. And that a lot of people to this day, and if you'd like look into it, they think that incident was staged. They're like, well, did it happen? Did it
Right.
not happen? Somebody came forward and said, we don't think that this was could have been an explosion, but we don't know if it was caused by, but they used that as the premise to start this war. Vietnam was basically, you
Right.
know, the only way that they could get Congress and get the people behind a fact that there was going to be a war and your son or your cousin or your brother was going to be drafted into a war where they might come home in a body bag, 2 months from
Right.
now. The only way was to have some sort of like an event happen. And that was the event Gulf of Tonkin. But people believe that, maybe Gulf of Tonkin never really happened and maybe it wasn't, so, like
Right.
that would be an example of like through history of this one of
Right.
these false
Exactly.
flag type of events like you're talking about. So,
Yeah. And they're the
and
same type of thing in a lot of wars. There's you could probably bring that same idea back through.
yeah.
Uh,
And
the, Go ahead.
and so this is so after like we had already discussed, you felt that this whole there just wasn't enough information as far as being able to prove this whole carrot thing, and you just felt like there was just too many holes and too many shaky,
Yeah.
either loose ends, dead ends, or shaky shaky testimony from a lot of these um, witnesses that something like this, if it was caused by a group or a government group, it would have been something like what you're saying. They had the means to invest this strong presence to try to trick the public into something occurred that hadn't occurred, or maybe.
Right.
I mean, we just don't know, but this could have been the testing grounds for like, all right, how'd the public react? Like, what do we need to tweak? What do we need to do next time? If we did this on a larger scale, what did we learn from the whole carrot investigation? Like
Right.
this is now coming from the angle that carrot is false and it was caused by a
Right.
government entity, which is going to be testing the grounds for a larger scale type of carrot event where they can trick or convince the public that this is actually going on when it really isn't going on.
Right.
And maybe that would be the premise, to kind of give up our power and give up our liberties to a world government that was going to save us from this ever pervasive threat.
Yeah. And in the beginning of the carrot thing, which only lasted about 1 or 2 months worth of evidence submitted or whatever, that kind of kick-started the public, like a lot of these other witnesses, to come forward and say, yeah, that happened to me. And it built up. So it just, something needs to be kickstarted. And then the rest of the people all pile on and say, yeah, this happened to me. This happened to my brother. And, once you get a lot of people saying that, then it kind of grows on its own and you don't have to keep feeding the fire all the time. It
Yeah.
keeps coming through. One of the things you mentioned there too was that people would hear the voice of God or whatever in their own language, or different narratives, I think was the term there. Just in the last couple of months, I saw an experiment done. It was like an audio experiment where they could take two distinct words, mix them together, and it sounded, you could kind of hear one word or the other word depending on an image on the screen, if it was like a square or a circle, and the two words are mixed together in this audio program, and it would say, you'd hear square or something, but
Yeah.
somebody else looking at the circle was like circle, but they
Oh,
were coupled together. And so it's
huh.
kind of like the different languages. Somebody could say, well, I am Allah, or I am God, or I am Jesus, or I am the Messiah, but
Yeah.
in their own different languages, but all one voice. So if there was a whole crowd of people standing around and they heard this kind of like garbled audio in their own mind, they might interpret that as their own whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, Lord coming and talking to them. So
Yes.
that's one possibility of how the technology could be used. And of course, it could be transmitted ultrasonically, so you wouldn't hear it, or you would just hear it in your head. You wouldn't hear it. So it
Yeah.
would coalesce in your head, whatever. So some of the technologies are there. I don't know about the 3D imaging in the sky. Like in the Project Bluebeam, they showed things that were, well, it wasn't a real image. It was like a movie scene that they showed. So,
Yeah.
and that's easy
Yes.
to do on TV. You could just say, "Oh, look what happened in China. There's dragons coming out of the water."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, like, not everyone's going to believe that. But
Yeah.
if somebody said, "Oh, yeah, I'm in China and I see this happening," they might have. There's another thing too, is which I kind of got the idea that some people were getting this thing about, I've been there before. I've seen this happen. They'd see the images of this UFO, and then they would say, "Oh yeah, that happened to me." Um, there's an interesting thing about deja vu, is that it can be the idea of deja vu, where you think you saw something that happened to you in the past, that can be triggered by certain drug interactions,
Hmm.
like I think it was epileptic drugs and a few other opioids like pain relievers, that does something where it separates a part of your brain to say that this is like your real memory and your current memory, and some people think, yeah, I was in this position before. So, it could very well be that if some of these witnesses that came forward later and said, "Oh, I saw this," well, maybe they had some deja vu of some sort. Of, even under stress, you can have deja vu. So,
Yeah, yeah. Like what causes that? Because everyone's had that feeling, like I've been here before. Like have I done this
right,
before? And like everyone's always has this theory about why we get that feeling, and
yeah,
there's never really been any conclusive evidence of exactly what that is or what that means because it's a feeling, you know. And I
right,
think that's the thing when it comes to people and feelings is that um, it it's almost like a religious experience, and that's why religion is so
right,
powerful. Because if somebody has a religious experience, it's a very personal experience, and to that person, you know, they believe they're talking to the voice of God. So you can't ever really get in between someone and their relationship with whoever created them, you know. So
right.
um, you know, I could see how, even though, like I said, I'm this documentary was really like the most exposure I've had to Project Bluebeam. I've heard types of theories like this bouncing around before, like a false flag invasion. I've heard Richard Dolan talk about this quite a bit. And then this is just me interjecting here a little bit with what I've seen in my research is that um, like I said, I am a proponent of there's, you know, I don't know to what level and what exactly, but there's some truth. You know, like I recently did an episode on Not Media about the Varchina UFO incident. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one.
Oh,
I could send you a link. I could email you the
yeah,
link to it. But
yeah,
effectively,
sure.
it was a Roswell type of crash that happened in Brazil in 1996, and there were beings
Okay.
associated with it. There was a craft associated with it. There was many witnesses, including doctors and people at a local hospital, where they brought one of the injured beings, and people that will still go on camera to this day and talk about it. It was a big cover up down there, and a lot of the hardware and a lot of the biologics were shipped here to the United States, probably filtered into some sort of a black program. But that there's some truth to that there's some truth to this whole like reverse engineering angle. Therefore, there would be some truth to the reality that some of these sightings, not all of them, but some UFO sightings are the real deals. I don't know where they come from. I can't attest to that. All I can tell you is that they're non-humans and it's non-human technology. That's all I could attest to without having further access to information. But I'm a
Right.
proponent of that. That's a reality. And all of a sudden, since this whole ATIP program, this whole Leslie Kean article got catapulted this subject into the public, automatically it's the Department of Defense ATIP, Advanced Aerial Threat Phenomena. They're a threat. Everything's a threat now. Like this is like per biblical times and per Christopher Columbus having a sighting and per like going back hundreds, if not thousands of years, whatever's been going on has been going on, like with this whole UFO phenomenon. Maybe after nuclear technology, we started blowing, lighting off nuclear bombs and thermonuclear bombs. Somehow this became a calling card for there to be more activity coming here because somebody's concerned about our behavior here. But now all of a sudden, somehow this has now become a threat. If it wasn't maybe already a threat to the military, but it's almost like that's how it's being packaged, gift wrapped, and sold to the public. Well, we need to focus more on this. We need to invest tax dollars into this. We need to have the government come in and tell us what to do because this is a threat. If it wasn't a
Right.
threat,
Right.
people would be like, "Oh, well, if it's not a threat, then like, what is it? Like a jellyfish, swims in the ocean, and as long as I don't have to worry about stinging me, then it's not like a jellyfish is going to come swimming into my bedroom and
Yeah.
stinging me. So let the jelly. I don't care if there's an overpopulation of jellyfish, underpopulation, as long as it doesn't threaten me and doesn't threaten my meals, doesn't threaten
Yeah.
my taxes and my kids and my schools. Who cares? So I think that's the average person, or like not necessarily the average person. I don't want to speak for the average person, but like I could see how a large proportion of the general populace could just be so wrapped up in life and everything they else have going on, like they might just have no interest and be like, oh well, it's something flying over my head. It's not us. I don't like whatever. As long as I don't have to worry about it plucking me from my bedroom in the middle of the night, which is a whole different topic now, But like, the second something becomes a threat, it becomes like, all right, well, now you got to get worried. Now you got to get scared. Now you got to tell your friends to get scared. Now you got to think about maybe being okay
Yeah.
with us taking some of your increasing your taxes a little bit, maybe taking a little
Yeah.
bit more tax money from you and putting it towards this threat now, So
Yeah. You give
that's
away your freedom for your security.
yep, yep, yep.
Yeah.
So they had that here, and a lot of people some people are against it, some people are for it. But after 9/11 here in the United States, they had the Patriot Act being signed, and
Yeah.
effectively the Patriot Act basically said what we're doing right now, for example. this doesn't necessarily have to be just between you, I, and the internet and wherever server I'm saving it to. There could be some third party entity who's a department of the Department of Defense tapping into this conversation right now
Sure. Hmm.
legally and saying like, hey, if something's talked about during this conversation, whether the fact that I submitted something on the internet and you submitted something on the internet, well, it might not be game to anybody, but if when it comes to national security, anybody could listen to this and tap into it and say,
Yeah,
hey,
that's
is
right.
this somebody, is this person up to something that threatens the national security of this country? And that was the Patriot Act. And effectively, Edward Snowden then came in and blew the whistle and said, hey, they're using this incorrectly. They're taking people's. I mean, like I forget. One of them said like there was a person that was sending a picture to his girlfriend, or like a picture. They were like circulating these pictures around these offices and like making jokes of them, and like like this isn't what the Patriot Act was signed for. The Patriot Act was specifically signed for to recognize the next 9/11. That's basically what it was. But then when
Right.
you give so much power away, it's just in human nature to be corrupt and like use that power for something else beyond the scope. So
Right.
anyhow, was there anything else you wanted to add? I can include, if you want me to, a link to that documentary, a link to your website. Like, is there something you'd want me to include or anything else you'd want to tell the
Yeah.
people about this or about anything about yourself?
No, I can't think of anything. I don't really do UFO research anymore. It was so exciting, the first one, and if anyone wants to try it, it's easy to get into. It's easy to
Okay.
be part of whatever, and go all the way. And I suggest if somebody else wants to do it, yeah, go for it. Get right in there, try to contact the witnesses or contact the other investigators and see if they'll help you out. And you might
Yeah.
find something. You might dig down and find something deep enough.
Yeah.
You
So
don't have
hopefully,
to.
maybe with all the hard work you've done over the years and the influence that you've had, and something that hopefully, with a podcast episode like this, maybe has some sort of a resurgence of interest. You could spark the interest in somebody else out there who has the next CARET or drone project or whatever the next thing is,
True.
or maybe you know best case scenario would be best case scenario if there was any truth to this, that we could ferret somebody out of the woodwork to come either contact me, and but as of right
Certainly.
now, I like that's where I stand. Also, it seems like this is, even if I have some hope somewhere deep down in me that this may be true, it's a cold case at best, if not,
Right.
like you're saying, a completely fabricated event. And I don't have the answer to either of those right now. But all I
Right.
know is that's what the general theme of this podcast, Not Media, is to focus on topics unknown that seem to have some sort of a merit at some angle or some way, shape, or form, so we can kind of discuss that. And I think we've done a good job of that. So
Mm.
um, I
Yeah, I think
certainly appreciate.
anyone who gets involved. One other thing I'll just mention is that I don't think you can be a researcher unless you embed yourself into it. So at the time when I had started, I came to the thing and thought, okay, I'll take this as if I believe it, because otherwise you're not going to get answers from people. If you come across and say, no, I think you're lying, well, then they cut you right short, right? So
Yeah.
so I put my mind in that position that this could be very real. And,
Yes.
and for a long time, I thought, yeah, it could be. And then when there was a question, I went to the other side and back and forth. And like you're looking at things as if they could be real. So you wouldn't have gotten the answers that you've gotten without embedding yourself in that idea of
Yes.
it's real.
That's correct. And if anything, I feel like after doing this research, after speaking with you, after watching the documentary, after going back over the MUFON journal that covered a whole episode, a whole subscription or a whole month of their issue on this, and then the whatever, remembering the whole Discovery Channel thing, I've probably shifted more over from being someone who's like, oh yeah, this has to be real, to more like, like like there's a lot of good points you brought up, and as now coming back at this with someone who's now over 5 years on the job as a sworn police officer, which I'm actively doing in the state of New York, it, there's a lot of problems with this, a whole lot of problems, and I can't objectively and honestly put myself on the camp of saying, "Oh, this has to be real," because then it almost just makes me look like one of those like guys on the internet. It's like, "Oh, everything's." You remember when and I brought this up before, and I'm not. This isn't to disparage Giorgio Tsoukalos, but I don't know if you remember when Ancient Aliens was a big like it still is a big thing, but it was like a huge thing back on the History Channel. There was
Yeah.
a meme going about, and
Yeah.
it was a Giorgio Tsoukalos, and he was like, and he had the big hair, and
Yeah.
under and the undercap just said, "It must be aliens." So like
Right. Right.
at the time, even though I respect his research and everything, they're just a kind of just a little lightheartedness to play on that, like you don't want to have the world see you as that guy, like, oh, this, like not media or Anthony and the work that you're doing, whatever investigation you did, like it must be aliens, it must be, it has to be, and then like you start looking like your research is slanted, and then it makes you look bad in the sense of being an objective researcher. So if anything, this has opened my mind up more to like, maybe you're right. Maybe you're 100% right. And I can't, from the place that I stand right now, even though I believe from my other research, and that's years of other types of research involving black budget projects, crash retrievals, cases where I've looked into I'm not sure. Have you ever heard of Kecksburg, Pennsylvania? Okay, so I looked deeply into that. I watched a whole 2-hour documentary for the main researcher on that. I looked, like, so cases like that, and like just it led me to believe that there's some truth into the Varginha UFO. Just a number of cases throughout the years that there is some truth to, like the fact that maybe biologics or hardware has been recovered over the years, the decades, and that CARET would fit perfectly into, well, how was this broken down? How was it outsourced into the
Right.
public, into the private sector? Like I know has been stated by people that have whistleblowers that have gone on the record before, and there have been books about this, that this is how it goes down. It's given to the military contractors, is given to the private sector to research, and then the fruits of that labor is ciphered off to the military for first dibs, and then it like
Right.
trickles down into like the commercial and then
Sure.
civilian application. So it kind of fits note for note for what, minus the CARET case, knowing what I know about everything else I researched, a case like CARET would kind of be what you would be expecting that
Right.
this where this technology would end up. But
Yeah.
like you said, there's just too many problems right now. There's just too many problems with the witnesses, with the verification of secondary witnesses, and the trepidation of these witnesses coming forward. It just,
Right.
there's just really not enough to be able to say conclusively, like, yeah, this is real. Because, if you said that, you'd be putting yourself at risk of being someone who's not an objective researcher, because you have to look at
Right.
the whole picture. So,
Sure.
whether it is something like a project, a blue beam testing the waters for some sort of a larger scale type of event to control people in the future, definitely a possibility. Whether this is actually something where, there was some sort of a whistleblower and some sort of a testing of some sort of a government project. I mean,
Mhm.
also a possibility. I just don't know, but I think it's good that we went over all the different angles and all the different options of what this could be. And hopefully, if anybody else is out there and they want to, like you said, throw their hat into the ring, give a
Yeah.
shot at the next project like this, or if anybody's out there that has any more to add to this, I certainly would want to talk to you if we can make any more progress on what the angle of this was, or who was the source of this project, if it was faked or not faked. Well, let's
Yeah.
just get whoever was behind this to come forward and just talk about it, and then be like, okay, well now we have a definite answer, but as of right now, we still have questions.
Right.
um Again, Anthony, I certainly appreciate you coming on Not Media. It's been great talking with you, and I'm glad we had this deep discussion on this matter of the Dragonfly, CARET drones, and Project Bluebeam. So you definitely enjoy the rest of your evening, and I will be in touch.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, John. It was very good talking with you, and it's good to kind of get a load off. Talk to
Yeah,
people about what happened. So yeah, I enjoyed it. Thank you very
I'm
much.
glad we were able to touch base like this. Been a long time coming with all the thought I've put into this project over the years, and I'm sure you have also.
Oh yeah, it's a part of my brain now.
Okay.
It's stuck up there.
Awesome. And I got to get my hands on, I'm going to maybe reach out to Tom Davis, see if I can get my hands on another one of those shirts, because I
Uh,
really like those shirts. Yeah.
yeah, that's right.
You have a
Okay.
nice evening,
Good.
Anthony. Thanks a lot,
Okay,
man.
John. Thank you. Take
Appreciate
care.
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye
Bye.
bye.
Thank you all for listening to this episode, and thank you everyone who has chosen a life of service. This is not just military, fire, police, and EMS, but also anyone who has taken their talents and passions and used them for the service and betterment of others and this world. I'm not saying goodbye. I'm saying until next time. This is your host at Not Media, JP, signing off. Stay well, everyone.